Good evening, everyone. Welcome back then to another LFM stream. It is good to be saying that again after being a couple of weeks away from the microphone and away from the comms box. And what a couple of weeks it has been in the world of LFM. First of all, a couple of big thank yous to send out to you wonderful, wonderful people. Whilst, unfortunately, streams weren't taking place over on this channel, you wonderful people were still ticking that follow button away, and we nudged ourselves over 1,000 followers the other day, and just an incredible, incredible milestone after just being here on Twitch for about 3 months or so since we built up this channel. So a big thank you, everybody, for all of that support. And very similarly, you may have noticed the VCO Simi Awards being up for nominations as of late, and whilst a few of you very kindly nominated yours truly in the commentator category, so big thank you for all of those that did send in votes for myself and the fellow commentators in the world of LFM. We did manage to get our championship here of the Case King Pro Series into a category ready for final nominations taking place over the next week or so. So if you do want to have your say and impact on the results of that, then do head over and perhaps provide a little bit of support for this little fantastic category that we have been treated to over the past year. Now, continuing on with the Pro Series, we've had a couple of dramatic weeks of racing, and to bring you all up to speed, we had round 7 and round number 8 of the Case King Pro Series that we saw a couple of new faces to this season taking victories for the first time. Some slightly familiar to the top step of the podium, and others not so much. Round 7 saw Jacob Osterman take his first victory of the top tier split of the Case King Pro Series. It was definitely a long time coming. We'd seen time and time again that Jacob had a lot of pace in that ITB race in McLaren, and it all finally came good for him at round number 7 at the Nürburgring. And then the following week, George Boothby returned to winning ways at the Barcelona race circuit and getting his first victory of the season and keeping himself very much in the mix of the championship fight. If you look at the championship standings, there's a little bit of an interesting one to go over and review. Because, of course, remember, in the Pro Series, we do have our drop scores for the season as well. Each driver will be able to drop their 2 worst rounds of the season, whether that be rounds that didn't particularly go to plan, or whether that they be rounds that have been no-shows, for example, potentially even DNS. And when you bring all of that stuff together, we have something that looks a little bit like this. Luke Whitehead leads the championship at the moment in the going into the final third of the season, with the 2 ITV racing cars of Roters and Osman sitting in 2nd and 3rd place. But George Boothby sitting in P4, he had a no-show at round number 2 of the season. If you were to add his average score across the season on to his current tally, he would currently sit just a couple of 100 points ahead of his Veloce Esports teammate, Luke Whitehead. So very much all to play for going into the final stages of the season. Tinko van der Velde, of course, our reigning Pro Series champion, also very much still in the title hunt, but will be looking to get some pretty decent scores in these final few races if he wants to make it 2 titles on the trot. And of course, with these drivers competing for some fantastic prizes, they will be looking to try to get their best scores of the season if they can these final few rounds, move their way up the leaderboard, and maybe sneak their way into getting their hands on some goodies. And also, speaking of presents and surprises, a wonderful change to the world of LFM has recently taken place, where Assetto Corsa, not ACC, but original OG Assetto Corsa, has made its way to the platform, currently in alpha stage, and very much encouraging all of you, if you want to get involved in some hardcore racing action goodness on the LFM platform and try dabbling in something a little bit different from that and R Factor 2, then you can head over and give that a go as well. Help build up the platform, that side of things. We make our way through final sets of developments before going full mainstream on that side of things, but a very exciting opportunity and very exciting prospects going forward for what may be potentially available on that front. So definitely a fun way to wrap up the year as we make our way into December, of course, and work our way towards Christmas. With all that said and done, though, I think it's about time that we head over for some racing action. So drivers will be making their way into the server now, and we can head on in and see how they're getting on in their final few moments of practice, as fantastically Ah, the wonderful technical issues continues. I seem to have temporarily lost my password to enter the server. So we're making our way to the practice session in just a moment while I go hunting around for that little ticket in. But we often talk about the way in which our drivers have to try to make their way in towards a race session. Do you either practice your final few moments in qualifying trim and try to see what you can do from there? Get yourself as high up the grid as you possibly can, and hopefully, depending on how the first lap plays out, that can be pivotal to how your race result plays out, because of course there can always be quite a bit of mid-pack chaos on the opening parts of a race. Or do you go down the other route of looking at optimizing your race trim pace? We have a 90-minute race this evening around Silverstone, and that extra bit of perfection on the race side of things might just be the ticket to gain your way towards the pointier end of the grid. So very much all to play for, and as Dave Marsh very much says, is very much dependent on the track and also dependent on the driver as well. And also a big welcome to not just those of you that have generally been following the LFM channel over the last couple of weeks, but we have a lot of people in the chat for the first time, so a big warm welcome to all of you as we continue to grow this wonderful, wonderful community. The good news is I have now made my way into the server, so we will be getting these last couple of bits and pieces sorted in just a moment, and then we can head on into some action. Now, in towards these closing stages of the season, it opens up a lot of questions as to who are we thinking is going to be at the top of that timing board in this qualifying session, at the top of the results at the end of this race, and does that start to set a tone in place into those final few tracks? Of course, with the custom BOP applied this season, it's a little bit more ambiguous to who's going to be on form, who's going to really be at the pointy end of things when we get to each of these races, because it's a lot more all to play for than we've had in previous seasons, where of course the in-game BOP sometimes tended to shuffle the grid around a bit to having some consistent contenders depending on what car they were in and what tracks we were visiting. Very much what we've had during the course of this season is that is something you can't particularly be betting on, and it is very much down to driver talent as to who is going to be at their end of the grid. So we'll get these last couple of pieces in place and we can make our way over to the session as these drivers dial in those final moments of practice and see what they'll be contending with. Of course, Silverstone race circuit as well, British weather, as some of you who may be from the UK, of course, I imagine have been experiencing over the past few weeks. Very variable in terms of what we can end up getting, so some potential for some mixed conditions that we could end up running into tonight as well. As if we bring in these final elements, we can see how our drivers are getting on in this session. We will be making our way over into qualifying, I think, in just a moment, as also Brennan, I do believe, could be the last car. He is indeed the last car to round our lap in practice, and we will be making our way over now. And I just saw a little bit of a glimpse on the weather prediction that there was a bit of rain lurking not too far away. I don't think it'll be hitting in this session in particular, but it is a little bit of a heads up to the drivers that they may need to be taking that side of things into account when they get into the race session. And of course, depending on how they've been building their way up towards this round, whether or not they are going to be feeling particularly comfortable with that side of things, or if they're going to hoping for a pretty easy-going race situation with some dry weather as drivers make their way out onto track for the first time. We see a couple of cars have returned to the pits already, maybe adjusting their pressures slightly depending on the track temperatures, of course. Getting those tyres in the optimal window is ever so crucial to the performance that you can potentially end up finding as Grant Caracas now make his way around. I see a couple of other extra names in the field that I do believe could be some, not so much newbies to the world of a top-tier racing on ACC, but potentially to the Pro Series. So this man, another one of the ITB Racing crew, Mikhail Statsenko, in another one of those very distinct livery McLarens. That's a very fast man who will be looking to have a good round this evening, and I think could well be his debut in the top split of the Pro Series. Also got the return of a Cody Sheriff for Genesis Esports. I saw some support for both Cody and Luke a bit earlier on as we were getting warmed up, ready to head into the session. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of support for that man there. I have to see if there's any more of the Genesis Esports crew in the server for this evening. And I think the rest of our drivers in the field, some of our more regular contenders. Mr. Niels Narks for BS Plus Competition, still sitting in the pit lane at the moment, not rushing out on track too soon. The Aston Martin driver has been looking competitive constantly for the last few rounds, but just hasn't quite had enough in order to dial in a lap and really bring it all together. So we'll have to see whether or not he is able to do that today and take his first victory in quite a while in the world of this championship, as drivers look to start making their way around the circuit for the first time of qualifying and seeing what they can get underway with doing, backing themselves up in towards the final part of the lap. Of course, we are on effectively what is the old start layout, so turn 1 is Copse Corner, and I don't know about you, I prefer it that way. I think it makes for some pretty exciting action heading through there. Such a fast-flowing series of corners, and really starts to build up speed over this fantastic circuit. And let's have a little bit of an onboard and a closer look at this one in particular. Number 22 of Ame Santamo will take us on board around Silverstone for the first time, as going in towards Copse Corner, trying to get that turn-in point as good as you can, and that's not the one at all whatsoever. Santamo, unfortunately, I think rather bailing out that lap rather immediately, completely understeered away from the apex, and not the sort of track grip that he would have been hoping for. Clearly, that front end not biting as much as he would have wanted. Through Maggotts and Beckett's he goes, onto backstraight, back end of that car, twitching a little bit because we are in the TC0 era of ACC, so these cars are just a tad on the snappy side as he now makes his way down towards Stowe Corner. Tricky spot, your braking zone here, really very much in line at the beginning of that entry curve on the left-hand side. Tuck yourself in and be careful with the track limits on the left-hand side. It really does look like the driver's struggling for grip at the moment, so not a lot of grip on the circuit whatsoever for them to be working with. So he now makes his way through the club chicane, trying to get on the power, squirreling those rear tyres, and then through onto what is the start-finish straight. If you watch Formula 1, of course, this will be a more familiar sequence to you. And now in towards Abbey and Village Corner, trying to get the line right, of course, getting yourself over to the left-hand side as much as you can to open up the braking zone in towards the right-hander of Village. Now into the loop. And slow speed, easy on the power through there as Grant Carrecas, a low 2-minute one from the number 4 car, and we know just how fast that man is. He's been taking a little bit of time to dial in pace in that McLaren, but he's still very much at the pointy end of what those cars are capable of. So if he is well beyond the 2-minute mark, this is definitely a very green track indeed. Not a lot of grip to be working with. Zach Durant, great effort from him in the number 26 car. And you see Santamo actually backing well out of that lap to set up the exit out of Luffield Corner and go again. Meanwhile, topping the timesheets for the time being, Luke Whitehead for Veloce Esports, currently with a potential kind of nearish competitor overall, I would say, in terms of the championship. George Boothby sitting in P2, just half a tenth away from his fellow compatriot. Statsenko and Carpenter get themselves in towards that top 5. Bischoff now for Sprout Esports in that number 1 Lamborghini. Gets a good lap in, but of course 9.5 minutes of qualifying left to go and plenty of opportunities for this order to shuffle and change around. As the Lamborghini for Bischoff, it has been one it's still fairly new for him. He's been using over the course of this year, used it last season as well, and has been finding more pace. You can see he's struggling with the back end of that car. Through Maggotts and Beckett's, really not sticking. In actual fact, backs out of a lap entirely. I need to be careful where I'm putting the camera, because I do seem to be having a bit of a moment at the moment where I am, unfortunately, giving a little bit of a commentator's curse everywhere I point it in this qualifying session. So we'll look towards our current provisional pole sitter of Luke Whitehead. He's found a second already on this lap, so it looks like the circuit really starting to rubber in now as these cars lay a bit more rubber on the circuit. So it could very much be a session of whoever crosses the line at the very last moment could be poised in the best position to get themselves to the top of this starting order. Scratch Correcus, big improvement from him, 59.6, so gaining almost 2 seconds on his previous lap time. May, of course, have backed out a little bit. Solstov gets himself into the 59s as well, so it looks like we are starting to find a little bit of pace now around the circuit. Luke Whitehead, though, going very, very quickly, 1.4 seconds now in the green relative to his previous lap time. Iamolo does a low 59, Zach Duran improvement again for him in the number 26 car. Luke Whitehead, though, what's he going to be able to do? Is he going to take him back to the top of the timing sheets? And the answer is yes! By 0.4 of a second as George Boothby crossed the line just in front of him on a 59.0. Luke Whitehead says, that's great and all, but I'm going to do a 58.6 if you don't mind. No, Reader, good lap from him in the fellow Lamborghini car into the 58 as well. Santama improved up to a 59.3, so we're starting to see some more representative lap times come on through now as Iamolo continuing to improve, 0.4 of a second up on his previous lap time, and is looking to try to make his way into the 58s. This Lamborghini looking a little bit on the Larry side as Tinko van der Velde, mid-58 from him. It's been a while since we've seen the Williams Esports driver contending for pole position. Of course, it became just kind of familiar territory for him last season when he took the championship win and, of course, was driving the Audi back then. But one lap pace hasn't quite been the strong suit of this BMW. Most of the circuits we visited on the calendar so far, but maybe that all changes today. The BMW was astonishingly quick on its arrival to ACC around this circuit. Then, of course, has gone through its various ups and downs with changes in physics, changes in BOP, now the custom BOP here at LFM. But it does look like it could be a platform that's working well around here. Cody Sherritt gets himself up into P3. Luke Addison, P6. So Genesis Esports so far having good showing around this Silverstone circuit. And I'll tell you what, Iamolo is going to get a fantastic tow. I think it's off Samir Foch just ahead of him in the Bentley. He's currently 0.7 of a second up on his time. Santama up by a second as well. So two drivers looking to make their way in towards the 58s very, very soon. What's it going to be for Iamolo? It's a little bit different tuck as to whether or not he was being held up in the final sector there. But I think for the Italian, it could be good enough to contend with Tinko van der Velde. What's it going to be? And it's just about going to edge him out for the time being. 0.1 of a second up on the Dutchman. Let's see what Santama can do in the McLaren. A little bit of an awkward line perhaps through Brooklands. And now coming out of Luffield, gets the power down very nicely. And I think it's going to be in the lower end of the 58 as he heads towards the line. More cars parking up just ahead of him. And for Santama, it is a 58.3 for the McLaren driver, as more cars will be making their way through a time beam in just a second. We've got a big improvement actually for Vincent Proel in the number 28 Ferrari. If you're wondering about these car numbers, these race numbers for each of the drivers are based on their relative elo within the server. So of course each driver on the LFM platform has effectively a skill rating and a safety rating that makes up their overall position of ranking within the LFM system, and then based on where they sit relative to one another in the server, and of course ends up governing that. Marco Bischoff, the number one man on the LFM platform, and of course by default then the number one man in the server, as Vincent Proel crosses the timing beam and gets himself up to P6. Fantastic effort there from the number 28 car. We'll have to see whether or not he gets shuffled down the order a bit further, because it doesn't look like a lot of track improvements going on at the moment. And we've got the likes of Jacob Osterman right now, 1.7 seconds up on his time. This is the first really representative lap from the man that took victory out at the Nürburgring. Statsenko as well, a fellow ITV racing car, just a bit further ahead of his McLaren teammate as he comes into Village Corner. Currently 1.7 seconds up on his previous best lap time. So could be looking to make his way very solidly into the 58. Don't think he'll be quite contending for the front row of the grid at this point in time. Jacob Osterman, 3.2 seconds up on his delta. Of course, he has only had a previous best lap time of a 2:02 as Luke Whitehead shuffles his way to the side, as Statsenko making his way through Luffield Corners. Got this kind of double apex feel, this right-hander. You can carry a lot of momentum in on the entry, slow the car up, use a little bit of engine braking to your advantage. It does depend, of course, on the gear ratios of the cars, as to how well it dials itself in around that part of the circuit. And Statsenko is a good lap from him, but it's only good enough for P3 at the moment. How's his teammate fare, Jacob Osterman? It's not quite P1, but it is good enough right now for the front row. Of course, man who has taken a victory already this season after being towards the point of the grid time and time again. And he'll be seeing if he can make it another victory to his name. A tally that I imagine will continue to grow over time as Giardier improves and gets himself up to, in actual fact, no, he doesn't improve, excuse me. Somebody did just do a lap. I think it was Zach Duran in the end. It gets himself up to P7. Great effort there from the number 26 car. And so, of course, these car numbers, if you see a very high number in a very low placed position, that's fantastic in terms of the development of these drivers' skills and ranking on the platform, because what it means is they are shuffling their way up that order bit by bit and really showing some of those higher ranked drivers who the new kids on the block are to be and who to be wary for, as Zach Duran continuing to make his way around. The McLaren, of course, has also been a car that's been very competitive here at Silverstone in the past, and I'm sure will be looking to be a pretty handy platform once again. Statsenko moving very quickly at the moment, went purple briefly for a second and was 4 tenths up, make that half a second on his time. Osterman's finding a lot of time as well, so the two ITV Racing McLarens looking very speedy. I think they've got Tinko van der Velde around them as well, and he's also finding some time. So yes, you can see the sandwiching McLaren's on this BMW filling. George Boothby gets himself into the lowest of the 58s, 58.0. Bischoff up to P2. Nils Knox makes his way into P3. So there's going to be a lot of cars making their way to the line. And Statsenko and Osterman looking very quick at the moment. We could start to see the first of our 57s. I think Statsenko will be the first one to lay the gauntlet down. He does, 57.8. Now what's it going to be for the likes of Jacob Osterman as he hits the time and beam? Tinko van der Velde went towards P2. It's now P3. And Osterman currently making an ITB Racing 1-2. This team has been looking mightily fast all season long with Lewis Roters and Jacob Osterman. And speaking of Lewis Roters, I don't believe we have him in the grid for this evening, so there will be a no-show for the German driver. But, of course, that will not necessarily count against him too much in the long run of this championship. Meanwhile, someone's looking very, very quick. We've got Jan-Philipp Nürnberger in the number 30 Porsche, and I do believe that is a new driver to the top split and making a pretty handy statement. Currently sitting in P5, and the lead of the Porsches, because Luke Whitehead right now is only down in P17. I'm sure he'll be looking to find some more time and making his way up the grid. As we get into the closing stages of his qualifying session, drivers will only have a couple more attempts at best. Michael Frey makes his way to the line and does a low 58. Another one of these Porsches. Porsche's looking quick. So are the McLarens. BMW, of course, the Tinko van der Velde out there. The Lamborghinis and the Ferraris mixing their way amongst the top 10 as well. So the custom BOP, the you wonderful people in the community, have worked so hard to deliver, looking very, very good. Meanwhile, I'm seeing a yellow flag for Luke Whitehead. So this is him setting up the lap, and he will only have one last flyer to get the job done. And the championship leader right now in P23, with cars going quicker and quicker by the moment. So it's going to come down to the wire for Luke Whitehead. Meanwhile, George Boothby, a penultimate attempt from him, a 57.757 to displace Statsenko. Meanwhile, Tinko van der Velde coming in towards the final corner. He's found 4 tenths of a second. Could be on for a 0.6 here if he rounds out lap. It's going to be very close, in actual fact, between him and George Boothby. Not for the first time. Those two went so many times last season. This time around by just under a tenth. It is a 0.6 from Tinko van der Velde, and he makes his way onto his final flying lap. But I do want to take a look at this man. Luke Whitehead, with natural fact, will go on board with him, because this really is a do-or-die lap. Otherwise, he is going to be starting very far down the order. Now down in 25th position, no higher than P8 for Noah Reeder. I can also see Santimer has finished his lap, I do believe. Samuel Foss starting in P18. So those drivers, no more attempts from them, as Luke Whitehead comes through Stowe Corner now, 4 tenths up on his lap time. And that delta is a 58.6, so he's currently looking to be at 58.2s, but he really needs to be finding a chunk more time if he wants to get himself onto pole position. We know the Porsche has pace around here, because right now Michael Frey and Nürnberger currently sitting inside the top 10 as more and more drivers round out their laps. George Boothby as well, looking very quick in the middle sector. Tinko finding a little bit of lap time as well. And we'll have to see how they close out their laps. Giardier 3 tenths up on his lap time. Vanity Barrett coming into the final part of the circuit as well. Whereabouts is Luke Whitehead? He's in the middle of the lap, and he has found almost a second, so it could still all come good in the end for Luke Whitehead. as Valentin Barry, the Frenchman, currently sitting in P15, 4 tenths up, will make his way into the 57. What's going to be for the Ferrari 296 is good enough for P4 at the time being. George Boothby making his way towards the line now, and it's going to be very close with Tinko van der Velde. Can he do it? He can by 300ths of a second, but Tinko's still on a lap. He may be able to respond. What about Luke Whitehead? He's found the second on this lap. It's going to be very close. In fact, Luke Whitehead about to jump up the standings massively. Can he go to pole? No, he can't. It's P4 and Tinko van der Velde as he makes his way towards the line. Will it be another pole position for George Boothby, or will it go to the reigning champ? It won't. It was the best lap that Tinko's put together, but it wasn't good enough to take pole position. I don't think anyone is going to be able to, and they can't. And George Boothby then gets another pole position to his name, continuing his fine form from last week at Catalonia, where he took his first victory of the season. And for this 90-minute race at Silverstone, he will start on pole position and see if he can make it back-to-back victories. Fantastic stuff from the Veloce driver. We knew the McLaren was going to likely be a good platform around here, and there are 4 of those cars sitting inside the top 6. But in the end, George Boothby managing to pit the ITV racing crew and the likes of Tinko van der Velde, our reigning Pro Series champion, to the post, and gets his way in towards the top spot. And support in the chat for that man as well. And we will make our way through the grid in just a moment and see exactly how they line up for this evening. So fantastic qualifying session to really set the tone for what I am sure is going to be a very tense round number 9 of the season. As I do believe, if all of this has played into effect, that these overlays are ready to go and we can have a bit of a gander through the starting order, and we can. We'll wait for that to refresh and head on over to see exactly how we are going to be kicking things off for this evening's action around Silverstone race circuit. So George Boothby, another pole position for the Veloce man, and Tinko van der Velde gets his way towards the front row. Kylo bringing in the stats once more and getting an 8th pole position for George Boothby, and now 2nd to Marco Bischoff. So George Boothby, of course, the winningest driver, as we found out when we were last here on the LFM platform. And now continuing to add other tallies to his name. Great showing from him. ITB Racing lockout 2nd row with Statsenko on his debut into the top split, taking P3 ahead of Jacob Osterman. Luke Whitehead jumped his way up the order with a final lap where he really needed to get the job done. He'll be a little bit frustrated, I imagine, only starting P5, but still plenty of opportunities from there. Jardier P6, solid qualifying from him. Timo Karppinen, the support for the Boatley will continue, I'm sure, and Mr. Carpet as he starts in P7. Will we see a Bentley on the podium? I'm sure there'll be a lot of cheers in the chat if we do. Grant Korekes starts in P8 with Valentin Barry starting P9, and rounding out our top 10, Marco Bischoff, of course the 2-time Pro Series champion, and now make his way to Sprout Esports and the Lamborghini, continuing to dial in pace in that car all the time. Santma in the end dropping to P11, still a solid qualifying from the number 22 car. Dario Amalo for a moment was looking like he could contend for the top 5, but in the end will only start in P12. Cody Sherratt, the South African driver for Genesis Esports, will start alongside his teammate in the fellow Ferrari 296 of Luke Addison as they make up the 7th row of the grid. Noah Reeder starts in P15 in the number 16 car, the fellow Sprout Esports Lamborghini, to Marco Bischoff. And Michael Frey, who very much jumped up the order in that session, but did end up P16 eventually. Niels Knox as well. He was P3 at one point with just a couple of minutes left, but as the track kept on improving and people kept on finding time, the likes of himself and fellow German compatriot Jan-Philipp Nürnberger started to drop down the order to round out towards the end of the top 20. Janus Reinders starts in P19, with Oystein Brenham starting in 20th place in the number 20 BMW. Antonio Fedeli, the Italian driver in, of course, the Ferrari 296 Italian, with Italian for extra Italian goodness, starting in 21st place ahead of Tony Mahoney in the 22nd spot, as then Lois Rainey, the first of the SGL Esports McLarens, starts in 23rd place, and he will be followed up by Peter Duvela in the number 9 McLaren, because he'll probably be wanting a little bit more out of this race, currently ranked 9th in this session for his ELO. So he'll be wanting to try to gain some positions in this race, I'm sure. Vincent Proal starts in 25th place ahead of Samir Foch in the number 17 Bentley. And then he is followed up by Konstantin Solostov in the number 12 McLaren. Rounding out the closing stages, Zach Duran. He was looking mighty at points of that qualifying session, but just could not seem to find the pace when it counted at the end of the session. He starts in 28th place, with Jan Drexler returning in the BMW. Starts in 29th. Krzysztof Makowski starts in 30th place in the number 19 Ferrari, and then Mattia Mex in the number 31 car starts in 31st position, and that makes up our grid for this evening. And we will be very shortly getting underway to see exactly how all of this evening's racing action is going to be playing out, because it very much is looking like it's going to be an interesting one. I have no doubt about that. And look at that manufacturing grid. If we scroll back about 6 months, I think we could have seen a very, very different picture. We have a mixture of McLarens, BMWs, Porsches, Bentleys, of all things, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, all sitting inside our top 10, and very much looking to duke it out around this incredible, incredible circuit. And 90 minutes of action, remember. And whilst, unfortunately, as my informant as of late, Kylo, who is hopefully enjoying a pizza at this time of the evening, as per tradition, that there is no rain currently on the forecast, but, of course, we can't see what the forecast is looking like into the second half of the race just yet, so we could have some rain playing into effect later on. It doesn't look like we have any Mercedes on the grid for this evening, Dave, but it is a tricky car to extract pace out of. I see! I misinterpreted Carlo's message. So we could, in actual fact, have a pretty interesting start to this race. So we do have rain potentially on the way, but depending on the level of severity of this rain, it is going to be an interesting one of how they play out tyre strategy, because if you start on the wet tyres, whilst the track is still dry and also whilst it's just not particularly damp, you are going to be burning your way through those wet tyres like it is no one's business, and they will be screaming, they will be on fire, it's not going to be a great time, and they also, when we do have the rain, won't be performing at their best. But these drivers have a mandatory pit stop, which they must serve in a central 20-minute pit stop window. So any stops that they make before then will not count towards their mandatory stop total. So if you are going to go from dries to wets and then potentially onto another tyre of some form or another later on in the race, you have to make a decision as to whether or not that extra pit stop, is that really going to be worth potentially whatever the difference of that correct tyre advantage for the condition that you have at the time, is that actually going to reward you in the long run? Will it put you in better stead in the second half of the race, depending on when you're needing to make your pit stop, as to the earlier side or the tail side of the window? And these drivers will have to be trying to make these decisions on the various predictions that they have going on at the moment, but they won't be able to see what's looking to take ahead in the second half of the race, and that could turn everything on its head. So we could see a very interesting strategic side of this evening's action, and with 90 minutes on the clock around this fantastic circuit of Silverstone, it is fast, it is historic, it is hardcore racing, and there's the rain already. Well, there's the answer. Windscreen wipers ablaze. We haven't even completed the formation lap, and rain has already hit Silverstone. How would it play out for this evening around number 9 of the Case King Pro Series? Buckle in, everybody, because I know it's going to be a good one. It's good to be back behind the mic, and we are going to kick off in just a moment. George Boothby, can he make it 2 victories in a row after taking a win for the first time this season at Barcelona, or will it go back the way of reigning champion Tinko van der Velde? Waiting for the green lights, they make their way closer and closer to Copse Corner, and there we go then. Good start from the second row to grid from Jacob Otterman, side by side between our race leaders. Tinko van der Velde trying to go around the outside of George Boothby, who just about shuts the door, and that's for the McLaren of Osterman, who got a blinder off the line, trying to see if he can challenge for P2 as they head towards Magnussen Beckett's for the very first time. George Boothby, though, maintains the lead. Tinko van der Velde hot on his heels. Drivers trying to adapt to these conditions on the fly. They haven't faced them so far in this session as they make their way through Magnussen Beckett for the first time. And I'll tell you what, Jacob Osterman looking very, very quick in the opening phase of the race. 3 wide, and there's a car around. I think it's Samir Foch in the Bentley that may have gone around further down the order. Luke Whitehead looking like he's trying to cool the tyres early on in this race, but but Osterman applying the pressure into Stoke corner as he launched an attack down the inside, and Tinko van der Velde having to go the long way around to defend it. George Boothby holds on to P1, but he's got to be very careful and mindful about where he places the car. Statsenko waiting in P4. Tinko van der Velde having to go brave around the outside. He's got Osterman on the inside. Switchback potential for the McLaren TC0 will be a little bit tricky to be making work in these conditions, as various cars, of course, will be adapting better than others. The McLaren, the BMW, the Aston Martins, typically quite handy in these mixed conditions. Whereas take something like the Bentley, it's a little bit of a trickier subject, and the likes of Samir Foch, Timo Karppinen will be finding that out, as Jardier looking very good in these conditions as he sends one down the inside of Statsenko, and Luke Whitehead watching, trying to see if he can find an opportunity to make his way through in a moment, side by side between the two McLarens on the exit of that turn. And Luke Whitehead, can he find any way through, sliding their way on towards the back straight, as it's still George Boothby, the lead, little bit of contact between Statsenko and Jardier down in towards Brooklyn's corner they go. Who's going to be braver on the brake side? To be racing car very deep on the entry. It's a switchback for Jardier. It's wealth of experience inside the cockpit of that car, but they're still side by side in towards left field corner as they are two abreast. Luke Whitehead, can he get the power down and use that flat six torque to his advantage? He's very close with his good friend Jardier. Just about manages to get the car across, heading into Woodcote now to round out the first lap. We're only a couple of minutes into this race and it is absolute chaos up and down the order, heading towards Copse corner now. Everyone jostling position inside of the top six, but it is still Boothby the lead ahead of Tinko van der Velde. Jacob Osterman the top three breaking away, and now Luke Whitehead, great exit from him, trying to go down the inside into a Magnussen Beckers, hits the bump, can't make anything stick, and Jardier will hold on for the meantime as they barrel their way in towards the back straight. And I think there's been an incident further down the order. We've got yellow flags for Nuremberger and Lloyds Rainier, the STL Esports McLaren and the Porsche having had some form of incident, but I don't think I'm going to be able to review it because we've got lots of action still kicking off, and we've got Tinko van der Velde trying to launch an attack down the inside, to the outside, excuse me, but he can't make it stick. And also a natural fact on this one, dropping a little bit of time between these two, but George Boothby then still maintaining the lead, and the Vincent Proel side by side with Sorensov goes all the way around the outside, but it's gone a little bit too deep. The 296 got a lot of traction, a lot of grip with that prototype-like platform, as the McLaren fighting back on the exit, trying to go around the outside. I'm not sure he's got enough of an overlap to make it work. In actual fact, fantastic braking from Soltov there, gets the move done through Club Chicane, and in fact, that is Makoski who's barreled his way up through the order. Did he make the right tyre choice? Is this what we're starting to see? There's Michael Frey, I do believe, jostling it out with Cody Sherritt in the Genesis Esports Ferrari. That is almost 3 wide, heading through Farm Curve, and that's Noah Reader in the Lamborghini who's getting involved in all of this, as we are potentially seeing some of these strategic decisions unfold. Tries to launch an attack in towards the loop, can't make it stick. But the traction right now for Michael Frey looking very strong. Santamo, who seemed to have a bit of an incident earlier on as well, scrapping away with Antonio Fedeli, but he can't do anything about the Ferrari that sits in front of him. Tinko van der Velde maintaining the pressure onto race leader George Boothby, and a penalty for someone already in the grid. We'll try to take a look at the stewards' inquiries when we can have a moment to breathe. And I think Santamo, can he make the move? He can't. He's just dropped away a little bit as they got towards Brooklands there, and we'll have to wait for another opportunity. Marco Bischoff looking racy behind Valentin Barrett at the moment, heading in towards Copse corner once again. You see the rain continuing to build at the moment, and of course pivotal decisions in the early stages of this race. One, how hard do you drive the tyres, especially if they're not quite in the right operating window, and two, did you get your pressures right? Did you get your brake ducts right as well? Brake ducts, massive amount of effect on how much core temperature is stored inside the tyre. And of course, the pressures as well have a big effect on the overall temperature and mechanics and dynamics of the tyre. It's getting very busy up towards the top 5. You can see that's Grant Correctus trying to call his tyres on the right-hand side of the circuit as Jardier tries again to launch an attack on Statsenko. 4P4 looking very quick in these conditions, and he is looking comfy in that McLaren as well. Scrapping out further down the order, it looks to be the likes of Zach Duran under pressure from the Ferrari. In actual fact, almost 3 wide on the exit of Stoke corner. Sammy Foster running a little bit wide in the Bentley, trying to go down the inside now is Zach Duran. Vincent Proel around the outside in the 296, just about giving each other enough racing room as Antonio Fedeli tries to stick a nose up the inside there, can't make it stick as there's a yellow flag for Oystein Brennan, who's got around. Hopefully, oh my goodness, how close was Zach Duran, was on the inside there going through that corner. Thankfully manages to skirt his way around the edges of that BMW. as they continue to progress. And Santima's gone around as well, so I think that's 2 incidents for Santima so far in this race. And Manside P11 now firmly down the order. As Tony Mahoney versus Makowski down in towards the loop now. The 2 Ferrari 296 is scrapping side by side. And in the end, Tony Mahoney will lose out to Makowski. And there's contact there with Samir in the Bentley centre round number 27 car. It's chaos in the opening laps here at Silverstone, as the Ferrari trying to rejoin very carefully, very mindfully, and almost goes around. And I think we've got more scratch 3 wide again. In towards Brooks curves around the outside. Samir goes, of course, losing a bit of momentum after that contact in towards Luffield now. And Proel trying to gain 2 positions in almost as many corners. The number 28 car, he's got the grip, he's got the power down, and he's got the move done. And now it's the likes of Nuremberger applying the pressure to Fideli in front. Nyax and Reinders are swapped around as well, further up the order for P16. Little bit of contact heading towards Cop's corner, and we'll have to try and check on each of these as we go. Zag's around looking for an over and under. He might get the move done. That's Samir into the wall. He's locked on the exit of Cop's corner. Chaos in the opening laps at Silverstone, and Ferrari will just about hold on to the position as Lois Rainier starts to chime in on this fight as well. The top 10 started to spread out just a little bit, although Jardier Whitehead still applying some pressure to Statsenko for that P4 position, as Tinko van der Velde breaks away just a tad from Jacob Osterman and still hustling the back of that McLaren. George Boothby and Tinko van der Velde, they went toe-to-toe many a time last season. It's been a little bit of a while since we've seen them duking it out. Meanwhile, Lois Rainier versus Fideli and Zag Duran as they go almost 3 wide once more towards the club chicane. The SGL Esports McLaren losing out momentum in towards the left-hander, and number 25 car makes his way around the outside, reclaims that position. Duran can't get a move done, and I don't think Rainier's got a good enough exit out of that part of the lap either to claim back a position. As we check in on Narks versus Rangers, we saw these two on the time board scrapping away not too long ago. It doesn't look like this Aston Martin, though, quite dialed in to these conditions as much as you would like. Meanwhile, Marco Bischoff scrapping away with Iemolo, who's very close to going side by side with Valentine Barrier. There was a hair's width between them through the exit onto the back straight and now in towards Brooklyn's curve, as that is Luke Anderson in the background of this trying to get involved in the Ferrari. It's Lamborghini, Ferrari in this 4-way scrap as Timo Carpenter tries to keep that Bentley just a little bit out of reach of these cars. It's a very wide line through Luffield, but of course that is going to be rewarded by a mighty exit heading down towards Cop's corner. Valentine looking quick at the moment. That's not the camera I wanted, that's the one I wanted, as the number 11 car currently in P11. See if he can improve into the top 10. Shows a nose towards the inside of the Lamborghini, but decides to think better of it, and we'll have to wait for another opportunity to come by, as Tinko van der Velde, I can see on the Delta, looking very close to the back of George Boothby. So I don't think the fight for P1 is done just yet. And of course, with these mixed conditions, do you have a setup that is optimized for the dry? Do you have a setup that's optimized for wet? Or would you try to get the best of both worlds? It's such a tricky thing to get right, and that is really where the upper echelon of these drivers starts to set themselves apart from one another. White flag for a moment from Statsenko, and you can see confidence on the entry from Jardier, who's continuing to apply that pressure. George Boothby latched onto the back of the lead McLaren in the field, but unable to make a move as of yet. And Statsenko losing a bit of pace. Luke Whitehead for a moment I thought was trying to do something special around the outside of Jardier. Couldn't make that one stick. Michael Frey, though, side by side with Cody Sherritt. Cody Sherritt, South African driver for Genesis Esports. Little bit of contact on the exit, and does that allow an opportunity for Noah Reeder in the Lamborghini to make his way through? I don't think it will, although this might. Side by side in towards Abbey, and then farm curve. And I think Michael Frey's gone very deep. In actual fact, he has to bail out on the exit. Does he make his way back onto the circuit safely? It's tricky to do in the wet. Flies across the grass. Can he get the car stopped? He does just about. So he will hold on to that position. Whether or not stewards have anything to say about that, we'll have to wait and see. Gap has actually opened up a bit between Tinko and George Boothby now to 0.7 of a second. So a little bit of breathing space for the race leader. You see, fighting the wheel of this Lamborghini, trying to get that V10 power down, as that gap opened up about as briefly as you could possibly have it, because Tinko immediately back on the attack, back on the charge to try and see if he can eat into George Boothby's lead, and can he apply a pressure to the British driver. Of course, on fine form as it stands right now for George Boothby, and very much looking like he can get himself into net championship leader territory if he could take another victory, because right now Luke Whitehead down in P6 as it stands, and not quite what we would have expected from the British driver coming into this one. White flag out for Valentine Barry. A bit of a slow run through Colt's corner, and Luke Anderson sweeps around the outside in towards Magnussen Beckett, snatches it away from the fellow 296 and capitalises immediately, gets himself up into P11, and they'll be trying to see if they can gain any more positions up through the order just outside of the top 10. Meanwhile, Janus Rangers over and under, trying to see if he can do it twice on the 296, sits ahead of him, and I think it's going to be a very busy run heading towards the next corner. We'll go on board Nils Knox in the Aston Martin, maybe trying to take two for the price of one. The experienced competitor of Nils. Will he try to send it? He doesn't, but he does send it on Janus Rangers, who has to bail out on the outside in the McLaren. Can he get moved down the Aston Martin driver? He does, I think, get it done, and he will now try to see, can he make it? Another pass in towards the club chicane. Big move from the BS Plus competition car, but can he get it stopped in time? Side by side through there, Rangers trying to hunt for an opportunity. Outside line, traction found for the Aston Martin, and he makes the move. Incredible stuff from Nils Knox. It's not the position he would want to be in right now after showing such good pace in the last few races, but he is showing his experience and showing what he is capable of, and there is plenty that could still happen in this race. We are barely 12 minutes in so far, and we have some more action and goodness to be seen through. Janus Rangers sends one down the inside from downtown. Cody Sherrod tries to fight around the outside. There was nothing he could do, and I don't think even Janus Rangers, to be honest, was planning on making that move. That was a very, very big dive bomb from far away. He just about got it stopped in time, but I think in actual fact it was a bit of a kind of a reaction to the Ferrari in front. We'll go on board with the Rangers now. You see, he's a good car length behind. They make their way through Farm Curve, and as he hits the brakes in the spray, has to bail out. That one sends it down the inside, and then just about manages to get the job done. A little bit of squeezing on the exit on the Genesis Esports car, who drops down to P17 in the process. But Rangers gets himself up to P16 there. Big fight between those drivers. Battle for the lead hasn't particularly closed up over the last couple of laps, but this one has, as Jardier has started just to drop back a little bit away from Statsenko. The ITB racing car maybe starting to find a bit more pace in that McLaren, as Jardier under pressure from the likes of Whitehead, Korekas in tow as well, and Carpenter not too far away. He's done a good job in that Bentley so far to keep the hard-charging Lamborghini of Marco Bischoff behind, as Osterman gets the white flag, maybe a little bit of a deep entry into Stowe corner, and Tico van der Velde back on the attack once more. Breathing space opened up for a moment, and then that BMW immediately filling up the mirrors of the McLaren driver once again. And it looks like it could well be a very close fight all the way throughout this race between these cars. Or will it come down to strategy? We don't quite know how the weather's going to change. Mistake from Korekas in the background. Fairly costly, but at least doesn't lose himself a position in the process. Of course, reigning champion in his, a champion in his own right, and the equal most dominant season compared to Tinko van der Velde, taking half the race victories in the end of his championship winning campaign. Luke Whitehead, does he send one up the inside? He thinks about it. And Jardier wary to the move. Meanwhile, what's kicking off here? Marco Bischoff has gone very deep in towards Village Corner then, and he's going to come out just ahead of Michael Frey. But Valentine Barry, Anderson, and I do believe, all gaining all through that. Zach Duran has had an incident further down the order in the number 26 car. I want to check them all out, but I don't think I'm going to be able to, because now trying to go down the inside is Michael Frey in the Porsche. Can he get it done in towards Brooklyn? Now he's got his teammate Noah Reed, and there's two Sprout Esports cars trying to trip over each other just a little bit. And Marco Bischoff losing a lot of time and a lot of pace in a short space of time. We'll have to see how that plays out in the long term. Duvela and Nuremberger having a scrap of their own, but nothing too much coming from it in the end. We check back in towards the pointier end of the grid. Tinko van der Velde, the closest he has been in a while, 3/10 just between himself and George Boothby. And Jacob Osterman not quite able to latch onto the same pace as our two leaders. As now Whitehead and Korekas trying to see if they can size up a move on their good friend and sister teammate Jardier in that number 8 McLaren, but we'll just briefly hop on board the rear wing of George Boothby McLaren. What's the speed like of that BMW? It's mighty down the back straight, but he can't quite get close enough in towards Stowe corner. But that's a concern for George Boothby. That is a car that can make moves and overtaking. It's got a very talented driver behind the wheel as well. Meanwhile, Santaman makes a move over Samir Foch through the opening part of the lap as he continues to try to reclaim positions and make his way up through the order. As Bischoff and No Reader continuing to scrap away, and No Reader is not having any of it. He's decided that he's going to try to go for the move around the outside of Club Chicane, tries to get the job done. Very fair racing between himself and his teammate, and leaving up some space. But what that has done is that has brought this man, as we go on board the front splitter of Niels Narks in the BS Plus competition, Aston Martin, and he is on a charge. He's up to P15 now, and he's got these two Sprout Esports Lamborghinis in front of him, and he's looking considerably faster at this stage of the race. Can't send one up the inside in towards the right-hander of Village. Does he size up and move in towards the loop? You see certain drivers trying to really carry speed through that right-hander and surprise their opponent in front of them by sending out the inside in towards the loop, because at that point there's not a great deal that you can do. There's just physically a car in the way of your apex, and in the end, after having to concede the position, at least duke out on the exit. But of course, the next three corners being all left-handers is somewhat fighting a losing battle in that regard. But Niels unable to make a move stick for the time being. It's going to get pretty interesting in a short moment, because whilst having made that move, Michael Frey immediately still under pressure from those two Sprout Esport Lamborghini cars, and will be scrapping out for P12 at the moment. Checking back in towards our lead pair. Tinko and Van der Velde go on board with him in this BMW. And see, look at that steering input. As he heads through Magnus and Beckers, he's trying to be as smooth as he can, and you can see really having to fight this car. I imagine he's a pretty happy chappy that he is not driving the Audi at this point. Of course, that was his weapon of choice last season, but we know it's a scrappy car to get around a lap. Meanwhile, Tinko does his on the inside this time. No, you can see the back end of the car stepping out on entry as he hits the brakes. Even the ABS not quite able to compensate for what I imagine is quite a rearward brake bias, looking up the inside and towards the club chicane. George Boothby, though, not giving in. And of course, you don't want to make your lines any more compromised than you have to. That is the art of defending. Defending where you need to, and only where you need to, because sometimes that car behind, he has the opportunity to try to place his car in such a way that forces you to consider making a defensive move, knowing full well that he may not actually be trying to go for it. So that is exactly what Tinko is trying to do. But George Boothby, the winningest driver on the LFM platform, hasn't taken a championship victory only the last couple of seasons, really, that we've seen him take part start to finish. Took P2 last season, and very much in the fight to try to see if he can contend for his first championship victory. And of course, some fantastic prizes that these drivers are fighting for as well. As looking at the chat, yeah, a lot of action in the chat. Statsenko, yeah, valiant fight from him in P4. He's not really in that championship hunt considering his very late entry into the season, but he, of course, has a great deal of right to be scrapping away with those around him, and a good showing so far from him. Not quite able to stick with the likes of Osterman right now, who himself is struggling to maintain the pace of our lead. To Tinko Van der Velde again, looking very quick, just 2 tenths separating him and George Boothby for the race lead. And he's just filling out the mirrors of that McLaren every single apex, just making sure that the Veloce driver knows that he's there as they go through Beckett once more. Good exit for the McLaren, but we know that between the slipstream and the overall top speed of that BMW, it is fast down this next section. A little bit of movement from Osterman over to that left-hand side of the circuit, and Tinko Van der Velde has forced a bit of a defensive move from George Boothby, trying to go around the outside. Is very brave from Tinko Van der Velde, but he's not been left the racing room there, and they will continue to scrap on. George Boothby doing what he needs to do, just placing his car in such a way that Tinko unable to find that extra grip. Meanwhile, Marco Bischoff trying to go for an over and under. A little bit of contact between himself and Michael Frey, who has a big drift through so corner. Niels Narks trying to go around the outside of his teammate Noah Reeder in this as well. Marco Bischoff has got the move done. Will there be a penalty? I have to wait and see. Niels, though, trying to go around the outside, make that now the inside on the exit of the club corner, and he does get it done. The number 6 car makes his way up into P14, and Michael Frey, I'm sure, will be looking to respond fairly shortly, if he can, to Marco Bischoff, who, after making that mistake at this very corner, did just seem to drop away from his pace, just maybe a little bit unsettled in confidence, not quite sure what was going wrong for the two-time Pro Series champion, but manages to at least gather it all together for the time being and make his way up into P12. Meanwhile, fight once more still around this top 5, top 6 positions, as Timo Carpenter's been chipping away at this gap and really starting to bring that Boatley in towards contention. You would have to think, being nicknamed the Boatley, that this would really be kind of its hunting grounds in the wet. Of course, British car at its home circuit as well, but just overall, this loud V8 brute of a car, not really quite the package that you would want in these wet conditions, but Timo once again managing to extract a good amount of pace from this car. Of course, with the custom BOP, able to be a lot more on pace than we would typically see. Otherwise, Samir has come into the pits, and we've also got a bit of a scrap going on between Jan Drexler and Zach Duran. At the moment, Drexler moving pretty quickly as Makowski and Soldatov side by side there. Soldatov sent onto the AstroTurf as they go through Copse Corner, and is going to have the momentum down in towards turn 2. Can he get it done? The 296 though, still fighting side by side. Nuremberger is trying to see what he can do in all of this, and whereabouts is Soldatov going to rejoin today? Rejoins right as where he left off, around the outside of Makowski, and I think we'll head on board with the likes of Nuremberger, who might be about to take the pair of them. He goes past one, he's trying to go past the other. Nuremberger, can he do it? In the Porsche is not the best car for straight line speed performance. Ida and Niox are scrapping away as well further up, but in the end, Nuremberger unable to get it done. Oh, I thought he was going to step one up the inside on the cutback, but he can't quite do it there. And in the end, we'll have to just take one and stay in P19 for the time being. We'll try to catch up on what was taking place between Noah Reeder and Niels Niox then. To go on board. My goodness, you can barely see a thing on that backstroke. The spray being kicked up from Niels. Does he make a mistake? Is there contact? Oh, it is a mistake from Niels Niox. Unusual for the German driver. A lot of experience inside the cockpit of that car. One of the legends of sim racing, but unable to get the car stopped on the entry. And O'Reilly says thank you very much and slides well out the inside and gets himself back into P14, so down to P15 it is for Niels in the Aston Martin. Meanwhile, checking back in, race leaders 25 minutes into this race, but no chopping and changes of positions between those, as a lot of cars still battling away for P4. We'll try to have a bit of a gander at the penalties, but it's a little bit tricky when these drivers are doing all sorts of shenanigans non-stop. So, we've got a 15-second time penalty for the number 15 car for an incident on lap 1. That car belongs to... Who does that car belong to? As I need to have a bit of a look over to Niels Niox. And Niels Niox, in actual fact, so the number 6 car in towards the pits he goes. Is that a drive-through penalty? Because that is surely not for a pit stop, because the pit window has not opened yet. It was Lois Rainier in the number 15 car, so that's who that big penalty was for. But a disastrous midpoint of the race from Niels. Was trying to progress through the field. Won't happen any further like that. Meanwhile, I do need to check it on Luke Whitehead. Maybe trying to go around the outside of Jardier in towards Stowe Corner. The Porsche over and under, potentially possible and viable. As Statsenko, how does he place his car amongst his foes? Does he look to just try to run away? Whitehead, does he set one up the inside? He does. Jardier has to leave a gap on the inside. Oh, a bit of contact between the two of them. And will there be words? Catches Correcaso, innocent bystander, but capitalising on the opportunity side by side with Jardier, who's sent onto the AstroTurf again. And Timo Carpenter may even have something to say about this. Trying to get that Bentley in towards the top 7 as they continue their fight in towards Abbey, but in the end, Jardier has to concede it. Can he do anything on the switchback through in towards Farm Curve? He's got to be careful of the Bentley and the Lamborghini of Iamolo that are not too far behind. How do they play it? They can't do anything about the two McLaren sit ahead of them, and now a 1 second gap already between Correcas and Whitehead. That is the power that scrapping away can have. And Jardier might be a little bit frustrated. That caused a very happy chap the vast majority of the time, but will he be a little bit annoyed at what Luke Whitehead did there in the club chicane? Of course, they are sort of indirect teammates between one another, but whilst Luke Whitehead may be fighting for the championship, that could have maybe left a little bit more space for Jardier then. Meanwhile, continuing to have a look through the penalties, we have a 15-second time penalty as well for the number 18 car, and that car belongs to That is Luke Anderson down in P11. Disaster for the Genesis Esports driver. And that is going to be a big penalty the has to serve during his pit stop. The number 17 car has a 15-second time penalty. My goodness, there's certainly been some hefty penalties in this race. And the number 17 cars, Makowski and Nuremberger, swap positions. I believe, in actual fact, it could have been the time board, just being a little bit on the sensitive side. But they aren't certainly continuing their scrap. But number 17, I cannot find in the server anymore. So whoever that was has decided to leave out. It's rained a little bit slow through Magnus and Beckers, but nothing too disastrous from what I can tell. And that is everything that the stewards have managed to cover, which takes us to not too far away from now, actually. We're about 6 minutes behind in terms of action in this race. So we've had some big penalties. It's either been a lot of no further actions or some big 15-second time penalties for certain drivers. And number 17 was Samir, that would figure. And yeah, he definitely did have a difficult start through the beginning of this race. Also, as Makowski and Nuremberger have now swapped positions, so the Porsche did manage to get the move done. And we'll try to see if we can catch that on the replay for 296, losing out. And it looks like that may have kicked off as they got down towards Stowe Corner. I think this must be a mistake from Makowski in this number 19 Ferrari, because as we head in towards the right-hander, just goes very deep, gets a bit of a twitch on the exit as well, and the monstrous torque and power from Nuremberger. And then, yeah, Nuremberger just goes flying around the outside, a bit of a lift from Makowski, and the number 30 car says thank you very much, and makes his way in towards P17. So a little bit of teamwork there between those two cars, trying to see if they can maintain pace and move their way up through the order. But my goodness, we are barely a third of the way into this race, and there's been action so far from the very beginning. Luke Whitehead continuing that action as in towards Cops Corner, trying to go around the outside. Surely can't make that one stick. He'll try to go for the over and under, quite clearly finding some pace now in this Porsche, but just struggling to make the overtake stick. Will he dare to go down the inside in towards Magnus and Beckers? Can't quite do it, as Datsenko, of course, very experienced, has sold and top down to the pits as well. So I think that's another drive-through for an experienced competitor in the top split of the Pro Series. So Silverstone in these wet conditions proving very tricky across the entire grid. But the lap times are coming down as Tinko van der Velde set the fastest lap of the race last time around at 206.2. As Whitehead still unable to do anything about the McLaren in front of him. That Porsche just not providing him enough straight line speed to really size up an opportunity. This car, though, the big bad Bentley, might be a tad different. Of course, that V10 pound Lamborghini as well, potentially opening up some opportunity. Santama in the McLaren trying to go around the outside of Peter Duvala in towards Stowe Corner. They go. We go to the helicam. A little bit of a squeeze, little bit of a missed braking point from Duvala, over and under from Santama, and he now tried to go to the outside once more in towards the club chicane, and Duvala in the end actually conceded the position. Not worth the fight between one another, and also maybe feeling a little bit bad for that kind of mid-corner shove. Nothing too much underwater, just very much looked like he missed his braking, had a bit of extra understeer in the middle part of the corner, but in the end, Santama able to get himself up to 21st positions. Now's also a very good time to have a bit of a look at our position delta and see the biggest winners and losers in the field. In terms of our top 10, it is Iamolo that has gained 3 positions in this race and has benefited the most from the very start. We've got Janus Reigns down in P15's gained 4. Makowski, big winner from the number 19 car. He has had a car that has been well optimised in these conditions. Gained 12 positions since the start of this race. And it is one of those ones where you never quite know where qualifying and the race spec of your car is going to end up kind of putting you, as that is Lois Rainier, who's gone into the pits, and I think he just retired his way over to the pits. So definitely a unfortunate situation, and he has actual fact left the server entirely. So disappointment there for the Frenchman. Not sure if he had contact. Drive through penalty, kick of oversteer for Iamolo as he hunts down the back of the Bentley of Karppinen. But we see Luke Whitehead potentially sizing up another opportunity to Statsenko. He's got a better run than he had before, but I don't think he's quite close enough to make a move unless he's super aggressive on the brakes. We know that Porsche is extremely good at getting itself stopped, but I just don't think it's quite close enough on this occasion. And in towards the club chicane, the ITV Esports car just not even thinking about defending that inside line. Doesn't need to. And indeed, we have a full hour of racing still left to go, and a lot of action that is ready to take place. We can see the weather dry up, we can see the rain come down even harder in towards the second phase of this race. It could go either way, but I can tell you something, it is going to be absolute drama and action all the way to the end of this race. And if you are enjoying all of this action, whilst we may have ticked over that 1,000 follower milestone, there is no reason to be stopping there. If you are enjoying what you are seeing and you want to see all the glory that the Case King Pro Series has to offer, and potentially some upcoming things in the future, who knows what this channel may hold, then do consider following the channel and continuing to join this incredible community. As Whitehead sends one up the inside just for a moment, filling the mirrors of Statsenko. He is really having to hustle the back of that McLaren, trying to apply as much pressure as he can. But the McLaren just able to withstand it for the time being. And apparently we've got Zach Duran trying to make a move for P24 at the moment, battling away with Matthew Metz. Gained 1.2 seconds on the last lap, so could very much be looking to open up an opportunity in just a moment. We'll keep an eye on that one as well. Whitehead versus Statsenko, Iamolo versus Carpenter, trying to see what each of these drivers can do. Because, of course, right now, for Whitehead, he's got his teammate currently sitting in P1, who's under a lot of pressure. But for that championship, it could be crucial points. There's not much that separates them right now. Big drift on the exit out of that section as Koreka's coming in tow as well. He's just calling his tyres. He doesn't want too much of a part of this. But Luke Whitehead, can he send one up the inside? I think he has. He's sent one from downtown. There's contact mid-corner between the championship leader and Statsenko, who's well off at Stoke Corner. And again, Grantas Koreka's makes his way past another car. So does Jardier in the end. Koreka's capitalising on the scrap, and that's twice he's done that now. He did it to this man, and he's now done it to Statsenko. And Luke Whitehead, will he be facing a penalty for that one, or will it be ruled as no further action? We'll try to see if we can catch what happened there. But drama continuing to take place as Luke Whitehead sent one down the inside. You can see Statsenko left nowhere to go. Oh, really got bogged down on the exit of Stoke Corner as well. That was why Jardier was able to come flying on past. Just no momentum as he found his way on to that, of course, that very slippery asphalt. Very difficult to get the power down, and not wanting to spin the rear tyres of his McLaren. That's a tricky one to see how it plays out. Of course, the stewards will have many more angles than we do in the comms box. We only get to see it a couple of times, but yes, it could. I'm sure that Luke Whitehead will argue that Statsenko turned in. Statsenko will say that Luke Whitehead ran too deep into the corner. It was definitely a bit of a dive, but it was a bit of a tricky one to judge. We'll keep an eye on the stewards' inquiry, see how they evaluate that one in the grand scheme of things. As now, what was previously a bit of a fight between Carpenter, Iamolo and Barrier now has included this McLaren that's running potentially a little bit wounded by comparison into the mix as well. And we'll have to see, can that Bentley make its way past? We should have a lot of straight line speed available for that car to work with, and I imagine that this man as well might actually have a very good opportunity heading in towards Stoke Corner. It's a massive run. George Boothby unable to defend as they head towards Stoke Corner now. To the inside, Tinko van der Velde going for the race lead, and George Boothby unable to respond, but he's gone too deep, has he? George Boothby trying to fight back on the exit, and he has got a little bit of an overlap, but I don't think it's enough. Does he dive towards the inside at the club chicane? Tinko van der Velde, middle of the road defending from the BMW driver, and the BMW does take the lead to the reigning Pro Series champion. The man hasn't won a race in several races now, unusual territory for him. Finally, patience is a virtue, and he gets himself in towards that top spot. But there is still 55 minutes of action left to go as they both squirrel their way around Abbey and Farm Curve, and the pit window has now just opened. How will they play out the strategy? Has Tinko tried to get this move done? Will he box straight away? Will he try to run away with that pace? We'll have to wait and see. Addison versus Bischoff. I think Luke Hansen had a bit of a moment through Abbey and Farm Curve, if I'm not mistaken. We'll try to catch it on the replay if we can for the 296. Let's see what took place for that guy. Has indeed lost a position there. As they head in towards the right hand, he's going to lose the back end and just understeers well too wide, catches the grass, has to have a big bit of opposite lock to stop that one from completely going around. And Marco Bischoff says thank you very much, and it goes up into P11 in the Lamborghini Genesis Esports Ferrari as Jacob Osterman comes into the pits. He's the first man to go into the pits. I'm trying to catch him. There we go. Jacob Osterman comes into the pits in the number 7 car. We've got yellow flag out for number 24 of Cody Sherratt, and I think some shenanigans may have taken place for the other Genesis Esports car. We'll take a look at the South African and see what's happening. He's battling here with Nuremberger. Not quite sure what for position this was for. I think this would have been for P15. Nuremberger sends one down the inside. Cody Sherratt, oh dear, just completely misses it. Breaking point. Oh, that is really frustrating. Is there any contact? Oh my goodness, Bukowski and Fideli had to go completely around the outside of the 296. And he does get going again, but that is such a frustrating and painful way to lose the back end of the car. That grass is super slippery, and unfortunately just sends you around very, very quickly. So, my informants of Kylo telling me that there is rain for the rest of the race. Now, I don't quite know in terms of the intensity of the rain, whether or not it will stay the same as what we have at the moment, but do you look to try to go for the undercut? You try to get a fresh set of wet tyres on and get those into a working window so that you can try to claim back that time if you're thinking in the position George Boothby, or do you go for that overcut strategy and pit that a little bit later and have fresh tyres at the end? Now, Tinko, he's only just made this move. And if you've only just made that, though, you don't really want to have to go through all that again, because you know it's going to be difficult. It's taken him almost half the race to get that BMW into the lead position, but now he's got himself there. The pace does look good. We've seen him make the overcut work before. We've also seen the undercut work before as well, and apparently Jacob Osterman, a stop-go 30-second time penalty, that will be for speeding in the pits, and it's not the first time, I don't think, that has happened for this man. Big disappointment for the number 7 car as both Tinko and George Boothby come into the pits. Very interesting stuff. So there won't be a tyre advantage for either one of them. But of course they really need to nail their pit box entries here. Get themselves stopped on the mark. Tinko, does he go straight up onto the jacks? And we won't see any animation, so we'll never know. But we'll see how they fare. A lot of cars coming into the pits now. But unfortunately, I think they'll be joined fairly shortly by this man, Osterman, but not for the right reasons. That is a big frustration for him. Of course, man has taken victory earlier in the season, showed such great pace, but just little misjudgments from time to time at various points throughout the season so far has really compromised his ability to challenge for the championship, because he does have 2 drop scores that he can make use of. Luke Whitehead currently in the lead of this race. As for those that haven't pitted, as I try to find Mr. Tinko van der Velde, and there you see, so position will resume, and it looks like George Boothby just losing a smidge, not much, a smidge of time in the pits to Tinko van der Velde, but those 2 drivers maintaining position. We'll have to see, will the overcut strategy play out? And look, that's the undercut power. Jacob Osterman would have slotted himself into P2, but that stop and go 30-second time penalty is going to plummet him down the order, and that is going to be a really frustrating thing. It's going to be frustrating for George Boothby as well, because he's now got a car in front of him between himself and Tinko that's not really in this fight anymore with that penalty in mind. And Jacob Osterman, it's going to be interesting how he plays this one, because of course it's in his interest to stop George Boothby from scoring as many points, because George Boothby currently sitting as a net greater threat than Tinko in the championship. So I don't imagine that he's going to just hand this one over to the British driver, who will imagine be getting a little bit hot under the collar inside that McLaren, because George, very composed, very fast and experienced driver in his own right. So I have to see how he handles this situation and pressure. And Kylo, he does make a very good point. We don't actually know how badly Jacob Osterman misjudged his entry into the pit lane. Of course, if he did have an overspeed into the pit lane of about 100 kph, for example, then his overall time in the pits would, of course, be maybe 1 to 2 seconds less than it ordinarily would have been. We'll try to have a bit of a look at what the outlap was like for Osterman. We can compare it to the likes of Tinko, because I think they would have both been running around in kind of pretty much clean air in the grand scheme of things. The other aspect of his second phase of the race, of course, is that now that the rain is kind of dialed in a bit more, the drivers got a bit more of a picture of how the rest of this race is going to play out for their tyres. How have they opted for pressures? Will there suddenly be a shift in pace and dynamic from one driver to another who may have spent the first half of the race not particularly in the right window on that one? Osterman's outlap was a 2:58.135. And Tinko van der Velde a 2:57.282, and a bit of a faster lap time as well, actually, for George Boothby too. So it's a bit tricky to judge there as to how much of a benefit that unfortunate stop-go 30-second penalty induced speeding was overall for Osterman's race. But definitely one way or another, not what he would have wanted to do, and a major, major nail in the coffin for his race. He will, of course, have to serve that, I believe, in a couple more laps as Vanteen Barrier and Teemu Karppinen continue to scrap away both these cars, now having made their pit stop. And that Ferrari may have a bit of a tricky time to get past the Bentley, heading in towards Stowe Corner. Bentley, we know, with that V8 screaming its way. It doesn't so much scream, it kind of burbles its way around. It's kind of, if a brick could be depicted into a car, that's effectively what this Bentley GT3 is. But I tell you what, as far as bricks go, it's a pretty nice brick. Apparently George Boothby has some headset problems as well. That's not going to affect his pace too awfully, but it is just going to mean he lacks a little bit of confidence, because especially in these wet conditions, your senses are heightened by absolutely everything. You've got fundamentally kind of less feeling in what the car is doing, because all of those forces through your tyres, they're going to be less, you're travelling less quickly. It can change a given moment. A lot of the way that you kind of interpret what the car is going to be doing is, can you hear that you're aquaplaning? Can you hear that those rear tyres are giving up? If are you locking up into a certain corner? If you don't have that audio, that's really not going to be very helpful. So apparently his battery is low. I don't know what type of headset he's using. Hopefully he can look to maybe hot swap another battery in or plug something in. He's done some weird and wacky things during races in endurance, stuff like that. But at least in endurance, you kind of got more time to make up for any losses during those shenanigans. There goes Osterman into the pit lane, serve his stop and go 30-second penalty. And that is going to be painful for the ITB racing car, as Tinko van der Velde, another fastest lap from him, a 2:04.320. So those new wet tyres immediately getting up to pace and moving along very nicely. Barrett still unable to make his way past the Bentley of Teemu Karppinen. We've also got Jardier just emerging out of the pits just behind Statsenko in the end. And we've also then got the likes of Iemelo, Karppinen and Vanteen Barrier not too far away from them either. So it's going to be an interesting fight towards Stowe Corner on the next drag race down. We've got Solstov versus Zach Duran. Solstov down the inside. Zach Duran, can he get a move done switching back? I don't think he can. So he will have to consolidate what is currently P15, of course. But this is, he hasn't actually stopped. So Solstov's position apparently is genuine, although that would make him the net race leader, so I'm a bit dubious over that side of thing of my timing screen. Jardier still fighting around the back of Statsenko, and same goes for Karppinen versus Barrier then. Each of these cars, different advantages, different things that play into their relative strengths around the circuit and in these conditions. Of course, you've got the Bentley that it's just a bit of a brute of a car, but what it does have, typically, is good straight line speed. So it can open up opportunities. It can also potentially be a good one to defend with, but it doesn't have corner and grip, which is what the 296 has in buckets, and Vanteen Barrier is showing that exceptionally right now. And then all the way around the outside, can he shut the door on the exit? He can! Fantastic move from the Frenchman. And I was just saying that where he needs to get the job done is in the corners, because the big man remotely the straight line speed. Oh, wonderful demonstration, lads. It's going fantastically as he fights back towards Brookman's corner. But in the end, the braking capability of that 296 is just a little bit too much to contend with, and they will not swap back to where they previously were. I will try to say, I've just tapped out the thing entirely. That's not gone well at all. I want to see how that fight took place from the very start. Hopefully, we should be able to catch up. I've now got to rearrange all my overlay and everything because I've been completely the wrong menu because I fell off the screen entirely. There we go. So, Valentine and Barry are on board with him as this was the move. You see, a little bit wide for Carpenter, and that was what gave the initial opportunity. And Valentine had the opportunity to maybe try to stem one down the inside, but in the end, opted to go all the way around the outside. Carpenter on that inside line, very fair to the 296, and you're going to see that Heat car just squeeze across the nose of the Bentley. A little bit better on the traction initially, but very quickly the acceleration of this Ferrari starts to get back underway, gaining momentum all the time, trying to go towards the outside, but as we well know, in the end, was unable to make the move stick. White flag for George Boothby a moment ago. Doesn't seem to have lost a great deal of time in that, in wherever that moment was, but he has, that gap has opened up 2.5 seconds now between himself and Tinko van der Velde, so really struggling in some form or another. Luke Whitehead coming into the pits as we enter just beyond the midway point of this race. Granted correct as his teammate stays out for at least another lap. And so does the likes of Marco Bischoff as Tinko van der Velde dealing with a little bit of traffic. Of course, he's on fresh tyres. Zach Duran still staying out at the moment in the McLaren. And the Blue do believe that Mattia Mex will be the next one to have Tinko making his way through. He doesn't have to get out of the way because, bearing in mind that these cars are not a lap down, they are effectively out of position. And this is going to be a little bit of frustration, actually, for Tinko van der Velde because he is definitely faster. But there's nothing that right now he can do about that Lamborghini. Oh my goodness, it gets very tricky. Mattia Mex not making it easy for Tinko van der Velde at all. Like I say, he doesn't have to. But he is, of course, losing him a little bit of race time. Any battling that he does with the net race leader in the meantime. As Whitehead comes into the pits. In actual fact, Whitehead is emerging out of the pits. And let's try to see whereabouts is he going to filter into. Tinko still scrapping around the back of Mattia Mex. Now, does he go around the outside of the Lamborghini? He does indeed. And George Boothby, I'm sure, will be making his way past in just a moment. And meanwhile, Luke Whitehead slots just in behind Dario Iamolo. So he has lost a bit of track position there, but he has got the fresh tyres on board. Of course, we saw Luke Whitehead make this sort of overcut strategy work previously at another race earlier in the season. And in these wet conditions, it could prove to work very well indeed. But it's going to be a tricky one to do effectively as George Boothby now gets through Mattia Mex. And that series of scrapping between Lamborghini and our race leaders has seen almost half a second to 0.8 disappear between those two cars. George Boothby, I don't know if he's in a bit of a better state now with his headset, but one way or another, that has at least kept him on the closer side to Tinko van der Velde. Meanwhile, this three-way scrap between Statsenko, Jarlier, Iamolo, Whitehead, make that a four-way scrap, and Carpenter obviously just kind of lurking in the background, having to do a little bit of tyre cooling though. That Bentley maybe chewing through his tyres a bit more than he would like, and Iamolo looks like he might be struggling just a little bit. This Porsche, Luke Whitehead, he's shown some aggression earlier in this race, and of course are looking to see will he have a penalty that comes his way. We'll try to tune in on that side of things now, and he sends one up the inside. He's not hanging around at all. And Luke Whitehead sends one from downtown. That's the sort of move I was talking about that you can send from Village in towards the loop. And Iamolo, in the end, just couldn't quite get towards the left-hand side of the circuit quick enough to chop off the nose of the Porsche and loses out as a result. And Whitehead now up into P12 on track, which will, of course, filter out somewhat as more and more cars come into the pits to do their mandatory stop of this race. Meanwhile, checking in on the rest of our penalties. So, we have a 10-second time penalty for the number 19 car. And that car belongs to, as I try to scroll my way, that is Makovsky. So that is a big frustration for him. Of course, a driver that has really made a lot of positions up in this grid this evening, but he is going to be losing 10 seconds on track time when he does eventually come into the pits. The number 3 car, and that is this man here, Luke Whitehead, a 5-second time penalty for causing a collision on lap 12. So that contact with Statsenko at Stowe Corner has, in the end, fallen with blame being apportioned to the British driver. And that really does stop any chances, I imagine, of getting himself into a podium position. As now there's more contact, and Jardier is almost around. He just about manages to keep it together. And Whitehead, Iamolo, both going through the team barrier. May be able to send one up the inside as well to the club chicane. Will Jardier lose another position for 296? Not quite able to get the job done unless he has a monstrous exit. It looks like a pretty handy exit in actual fact, as Vanti, bear in mind, he is the fastest car on track. Exceptional stuff from the Yasik car that has really started to dial in some pace, but disaster for Jardier. Thankfully managed to keep it pointing vaguely in the right direction, and now Luke Whitehead, we've seen these two come to blows already. Will they do it once more? Of course, that penalty is something that Whitehead is going to have to face one way or another. Sends one up the inside of Statsenko. In actual fact, of course, the reason why Whitehead may have lost a chunk of time, when did that penalty come through? Because that may have been prior to his stop, in which case, if it was, that time was already being served, and Luke Whitehead may actually be battling for these positions net on track, which relative to where they've all kind of filtered out, actually may be the case. I'm not 100% certain on that front. So Whitehead may still very much be in the fight for a podium, because Osterman took himself out of the equation with that stop-go 30-second time penalty. And now, while Stinko van der Velde and George Boothby have definitely pulled away at the front of the grid, as Whitehead looking around the outside in towards Copse Corner. You can see he's applying a lot of pressure to the back of Statsenko now. There is a big tyre difference between these cars, and the McLaren driver trying to get away with as minimal defending as he can, and he's not going to be too happy, of course, with how things played out earlier on between these drivers. And Marco Bischoff, I can tell you, has also started to chip into this battle as well. So all the way from P9 to P13, we have cars separated by absolutely the smallest of margins, as now Luke Whitehead gaining in the slipstream. How's offensive to Statsenko go? He stays towards the middle of the circuit. Oh, he moves back to the left-hand side right before the braking zone. Luke Whitehead won't be too pleased about that one, but I'm sure in Statsenko's mind that'll all be fair game after the incident they had down at this corner earlier on. Mattia Mex trying to, in actual fact, just conceded a position to Grant Karekas, who, of course, is actual fact, Karekas, has he served his pit stop? He must have done at this phase of the race. So Grant Karekas, with all of this scrapping that has taken place, he finds himself in net P3, having started what would have been P8. So great stuff so far from him. A mature drive from a Lithuanian to get himself into the net podium spots. So we wait for final cars to come into the pit lane as Luke Whitehead tries to send one up the inside. I can't do it, Luke Whitehead. There we go. We've seen him make this move already. No love lost between these two. And flat six power from the Porsche will have the initial torque advantage. How do they fare through here? It's very close. Statsenko sent onto the asphalt. Iamolo will go on board with him as he watches these two scrapping their way down towards Brooklyn, surely with the tyre advantage. Luke Whitehead, can he get the move done on the inside? Statsenko's trying to fight it. There's contact again. Iamolo's joined the party. He can't get out the inside. Statsenko! But it may be going for the over and under. Statsenko all over the place through this part of the circuit, and through Luffield they go. The Italian capitalises. Jardier now, of course, had contact with this man just a few moments ago, and it's all gone wrong for Statsenko. The number 29 car falling down the order into that position almost exactly, as now Iamolo's through. Jardier is through, potentially in towards Gold Bounty, and Barrett trying to make a move as well. Can't make it stick. Marco Bischoff joining the fight, trying to go around the outside of Bounty and Barrett. It's chaos down for these positions outside the podium. Bischoff looks one way, Bischoff looks the other, and he's got Carpenter in his rear view mirrors as well as they fly through Maggots and Beckett's. One more time, Luke Whitehead 1.5 seconds clear of Iamolo, so he is already looking to pull away, and if he does have that penalty carrying over, then he is going to be looking to try and make as much of a gap as he possibly can. And apparently the last 10 to 15 minutes of this race there will be no rain, and that could be a very interesting phase of the race. Will we see anyone gamble to go onto the slick tyres, or will it just be a case of trying to preserve those wets as long as you can? And those that have pitted early in this race, maybe they will be in a bit of trouble in the closing stages, as that Bentley hunting around the gearbox of this V10 powered Lamborghini, but as of right now unable to do anything. No further action on any more incidents so far. Vanting, though, looking for a move potentially onto Statsenko himself in towards Abbey Curve. Can't make anything stick as they head in towards far. We stay on board with Marco Bischoff, the number 1 car, trying to go around the outside of the 296. Go for the comeback. Surely can't make anything work here. And there we go. The engineer coming on the radio. Pit window has now closed. So your running order, Tinko van der Velde, 1.7 seconds clear of George Boothby, who is gaining a smidge of time, but needs to be chipping away at that gap just a bit more if in the next 35 minutes of this race he wants to get himself back into the race lead. Korekis finds himself in a relatively comfortable P3 as it stands right now. Vanti Barrett trying to apply pressure to Statsenko, still can't make it work. And then it is Whitehead, Iamalo, Jardier, Statsenko, Barrier, Bischoff and Karppinen that round our way to the tail end of the top 10. Absolute chaos and action ablaze as always in the Pro Series. This is the sort of action we've been treated to every single race so far this season, and this is what we typically anticipate from these guys. So the best drivers on ACC, the best on the LFM platform, but it gives us some of the greatest action. Noah Reeder has come into the pit, so I can only imagine that that's a drive-through penalty for track limits. So disaster for the fellow Sprout Esports car, but Marco Bischoff currently sitting in P9. If he can do anything about Vantin in that number 11 Ferrari ahead of him. Lap times were very similar between these three last time round. Statsenko, of course, not looking like he's the most comfortable with this phase of the race either, so his position could be in a bit of jeopardy right now as well. As George Boothby just took out another 1/10 of a second from Tinko van der Velde, sniffing up the inside of the club chicane is that number 1 Lamborghini of Marco Bischoff, but he can't make anything happen on this occasion. Gets the power down. Will he look to do anything towards Abbey Farm? Calling for tyres again from Karppinen, which could be more important now that we are going to be entering a bit of a drier phase of the race in the closing stages. Any saving that you can do to those tyres now could pay dividends later on, and Bischoff won't go down the inside this occasion, but he won't have to. Oh my goodness, Fancy, I thought he was going to go into the back of Statsenko, trying to send it up the inside. Marco Bischoff, I thought he was going to have enough of an overlap there to get it done, but he can't make it stick. Meanwhile, Luke Whitehead moving along very quickly, as is Grant Korekis, actually. My goodness, the two Veloce cars of Korekis and Whitehead, they are setting blistering lap times at the moment, 2:03.7. They are almost 3/4 of a second faster than the lead pair, and there is only 4 seconds between Korekis and George Boothby. We could still have a bit of a multi-way scrap for the race win in the closing stages, and bear in mind those guys pitted later. They will be in a better position later on in this race, and with this weather potentially phasing out and the track starting to dry out, that can start to get very interesting. We could have an element of survival from the number 5 and the number 2 car at the point end of the field, and whilst the Lithuanian, the British drivers of Korekis and Whitehead may be hunting them down on the final laps. Meanwhile, speaking of hunting, Niels Nark's doing just that, trying to see if he can make his way past another car that's had just as much attrition, trying to go around the outside in the Aston Martin. He's made moves like that stick earlier today, but on this occasion on the outside of Luffield, just can't quite get the power down and gets himself onto the AstroTurf as well. Someone else that's going side by side, I do believe, could be Marco Bischoff versus Vantin Barry towards Stoke Corner. They go around the outside of the Lamborghini driver. He goes in that number car. Little bit of contact mid-corner, and that will be enough just to upset the car, just to lose momentum. And Timo Karppinen now joining the party as well. We're on board the rear wing of Vantin as he watches the Lamborghini and the Bentley side by side towards the club chicane, and Bischoff, he leaves more than enough room for Karppinen, who may have just enough momentum on the exit. It doesn't look like he was able to get the power down. And that, of course, that Bentley, one of the weaker sides of that car at the best of times, let alone when you are on a slippery Silverstone race circuit. As they make their way through these two corners, Abbey and Farm. Fantastic sequence, of course, much like Magnus and Beckett's, that very fast flowing series of right and left. The Lamborghini just edging a small amount of advantage there. Same can be said for Valentin's Ferrari. Apply more and more pressure to Statsenko as Narks versus Ito, I think, has arrived. A bit of a climax between these two. You can see the Aston Martin. Oh, it's going to send it on the inside of Stoke Corner. He tries to fake the move. No Reader doesn't give into it, runs a little bit wide. That was the kicker. Lost a bit of momentum there, kick of oversteer, and Niox seizes the opportunity, sends one down the inside, and in the end, nothing the Norwegian could do. Has the nose just a little bit cut across the front of him in towards the exit and onto the alternative layout start finish straight, and drops a position in the process. So Narks now up into P19 as he continues his recovery through the field, as again these lap times right now from Luke Whitehead and Grant Korekas are scarily quick. We have 30 minutes of racing left to go. And as we get into this shot, there you go. There's your two race leaders. Your top four, all separated, they're all contained within a single straight, which we would typically anticipate in a Pro Series race anyway, because that is just the caliber, the closeness of these fields. But my goodness, the way that they are closing that gap, it would take only around 4 to 5 laps to really have Korekas and Whitehead start to mingle amongst Boothby. I tell you what, for Tinko, he'll be hoping that they scrap away, but will George Boothby just let the likes of Korekas pass? He probably won't be so keen to let Whitehead pass, because he is definitely more of a direct competitor right now in the championship. But if he lets Korekas pass, he might be able to go after Tinko van der Velde and take some points off his fellow championship rivals. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. Team tactics may come into effect, or it could just be a hardcore duking out of these positions to the very end, one way or another. I think it's going to be fantastically exciting. Meanwhile, Bischoff again looks around the outside. Valentine tries to set one on the inside of Sasenko, but here comes Bischoff. Carries a huge amount of momentum. He doesn't even have to dive bomb in towards the loop. He saw the gap. He saw the Valentine was a little bit caught up behind the McLaren ahead, and the Marco Bischoff, a two-time Pro Series champion, capitalises immediately and says well on the inside. And here comes Carpenter using all the straight line speed, using all the toe. They're almost going to be 3 wide heading in towards the next turn. How do they fare through here? Valentine says well at the inside. Does he go a bit too deep on the brakes? He does. Carpenter signs his way back, but he's still got that Ferrari 296 on the inside. Side by side through Luffield they go on the power. Fantastic racing between these two, but in the end the Frenchman does come out on top and holds on to P9. Carpenter remains in P10 then, but this fight will continue on, I'm sure. And whilst Korekas on that last lap just lost a little bit of pace compared to the previous laps that he has done, Luke Whitehead once again went faster. He did a 2:03.5. For reference, Tinko van der Velde, your race leader, did a 2:05.1. He is 1.6 seconds faster than your race leader as it stands right now. Meanwhile, Luke Anderson versus Jan-Philipp Nuremberger in the Porsche, hunting all over the back of this Ferrari. We've also got a bit of company there from Antonio Fedeli as well. But Luke Whitehead, it looked like he was struggling in the early phase of this race, but that overcut strategy may be paying off. White flag out for Jardier. Don't think there was anything too dramatic at that point of the circuit. Bischoff, though, pressing on, trying to see if he can dispatch of Statsenko, seems to have been really in a spot of bother at this stage of the race. Now, we do have a car that's just come into the pits. That is always Simon Brenham. Now, it could be for a drive-through penalty. And we'll see if he does look to box. He doesn't, so I think that is indeed for a drive-through. Whether or not, I was just wondering, is there anyone that's going to try gambling for the slick tyres just yet? You wouldn't think there would be, but maybe in around 10-15 minutes time, that could be where we start to see things happen. Meanwhile, Bischoff around the outside once again. This is where he's been looking so confident, and I think he might be able to replicate his move once more on the McLaren driver. Statsenko, nothing he can do. Valentine Marius sends him on the inside. He's trying to take a leaf out of Marco Bischoff's book. Marco Bischoff says, thank you very much, lads. You battle away, and I will bugger off into the distance. But Statsenko now has the Ferrari onto his gearbox. And see Carpenter just calling his tyres in the background. Can't do anything about these two just yet. A bit deep on the brakes, so for the number 29 Carpenter brings him back to the apex to close off the gap. But it does look like this McLaren just struggling for pace overall at this phase of the race. As lap times once again coming through, and it was another 0.8 to a second advantage for Korekas and Whitehead over our lead pairing. Those gaps are coming down. They are coming down quickly, and we can have an exceptional fight towards the end of this race. Definitely stay tuned in for that one. Just 25 minutes left to go of this 90-minute race at Silverstone. It's a sprint category for a reason, because this is the sort of action we have start to finish every single time we go racing in this championship. And Silverstone, fast, dramatic, adrenaline-fueled action as we would always expect. Meanwhile, Tony Mahoney versus Vincent Perel, 2.296 is down at the back of the field in 26th and 27th place. But showing that no matter where you are in this grid, you can still be having a fantastic fight. Bit of a squirrely moments through Farm Curve for the number 27 car, but does manage to just about gather it all up in the end and keeps on pressing on. And each of those gaps between our top 4 drivers is 1.7 seconds apiece, as it stands right now. But those latter 2 Veloce Esports cars are just looking mightily quick at this stage of the race and really chipping away at the gaps at the front of the field. Much like this man of Valentin Barry, who is continuing to try to find pace and a move, and not that way. Carpenter may even be able to send one up the inside. Can he? He's a bit too far away in the Bentley on this occasion. But Statsenko continuing to struggle. Meanwhile, Bischoff, 204.6 clear of any pace that he's done so far, and he's 5/10 up on his personal best. His lap times right now, Marco Bischoff, no wonder he made his way through this part of the grid as quickly as he did, because his times right now are very much matching the likes of Luke Whitehead. We'll get an idea of everyone's pace as they hit the time being once more in just a moment. So there's a mid-4 for both our lead pairs, and there's a low 2 and a high 8 for Luke Whitehead. So again, another 7/10 of a second for the Porsche driver. And meanwhile, Marco Bischoff, what did he do? He did a 204.1. That was the second fastest lap on the track last time around, and 7/10 of a second faster than Jardier as well. So he could be continuing to find a bit of time. Carpenter squirrely on the exit curb of Copse Corner. Got to be careful in that Bentley if it doesn't just snap around on him in an instant, because it will. It's about as dicey as the Porsche in that regard. But with just slightly less chaos on the entry for the likes of Liftoff Oversteer, but definitely one that will keep you on your toes. It's a fun driving experience when you do hook it all up, but my goodness, it can be a tricky one as well. Let's go on more on the front splitter of this Bentley as it roars its way down the back straight. Very grumbly sounding car. And you see that gap opening up between the Ferrari and the McLaren as they got towards Stowe Corner. But then as soon as they get to the exit, Valentin just able to use all of the grip that platform provides. Got a lot of confidence right now in that car, but just unable to make a move happen or make a move stick. It's towards Abbey and Farm Curve they go as we switch to the rear wing of the McLaren of Statsenko. Manages to hold pretty good pace through there. Of course, the McLaren, no slouch in the high-speed corners, but that Ferrari is just something a little bit special. It's just got a bit more confidence that you're able to wield around it. It delivers its power a bit more smoothly, less aggressively, which, as of late, especially in the TC0 kind of era of ACC, can be a little bit detrimental at times. It doesn't have as much aggression for you to latch on with, but it certainly is a rewarding car in mixed conditions. Meanwhile, the fights that I thought could be starting to build up are starting to come to fruition. Grantis Correcas now within just half a second of George Boothby as we go through. There you go, a 204.2 from Correcas, a 205.3 from his teammate, and a 205.0 from Tinko van der Velde leading this race. And you can see there is nothing separating them right now. Same can be said for Santama versus Narks. Narks doing 203.9s, looking very, very quick at this stage of the race, and he'll be surging his way up the order as best as he can, gets the move done in towards Brooklands Curve. But of course, Correcas, Whitehead, Boothby, all teammates, and a bit of a wiggle for George Boothby there. How does Boothby decide to play this? Is he going to fight it out, or is he going to allow Correcas to try to charge after Tinko? And maybe thinking a little bit more about championship, because we know right now the pace advantage is definitely with those two Veloce cars that you see in the background there, the McLaren of Grantis Correcas and Luke Whitehead. Luke Whitehead still just the slightly faster of the two, but he was 1.3 seconds faster than George Boothby. You just would not think that Boothby would be able to hold on to these positions for all too long. He's done some pretty fantastic defensive magic in the past. So has Tinko at Brands Hatch as well. These two had a fantastic scrap all evening long. But this might just be a fight that's a bit too hard in that regard. Meanwhile, Bischoff continuing his electrifying pace, 204.1, 7/10 gained and maybe a position gained over Jardier. He's got the confidence, he's got the grip, and he does have the position, and I think the same might be said for Korekis over George Boothby. Jardier is not going to be able to fight back, but Korekis has got the move done. George, can he do anything towards Brookson's curves and flashes the lights there? And Luke Whitehead sends one down the inside. George Boothby, I think, was flashing lights there, being kind to Korekis, maybe. We'll have to see in a moment, but no love lost between the launcher, and again, a car shoved wide by Luke Whitehead in this race, and that could potentially be another penalty coming his way, and might see these two swap positions. We'll see if we can catch what took place between George Boothby and Grant Korekis. We'll also have a quick look at penalties. Nothing new as of yet. As we go through Avian Farm Curve, this is the onboard, there we go, from Grant Korekis. And does he send one up the inside? He doesn't. Is it a mistake from George? It is a mistake from George Boothby. Unusual, but a quick decision from Grant Korekis. Sends one up the inside and does leave room on the exit for his teammate, which is perhaps a little bit more than could be said for Luke Whitehead. I think the replay, unfortunately, is going to cut out by the time we get there. And it will indeed, but Luke Whitehead definitely sent it out the inside and did not leave too much in the way of wiggle room for George Boothby to work his way with. So it's currently Tinko van der Velde leading this race with 20 minutes left to go, and he would have wanted that fight to take place a lot longer than it did, because Korekis and Whitehead, who have been looking mighty quick so far, as Janus Reinders has brought out the yellow flag. Disaster for the number 10 car. What has happened to him? And that is out of Magnus and Beckett. So we'll see, he's driving around by himself. So you can see these conditions still immensely tricky. These drives make it look so easy. But now, see that McLaren, is it just going to give way underneath him? Does he catch too much of a curb? And now heading through the right-hander, it's just going to go... Oh, he's just taken way too much exit curb. Oh, and does he get it stopped? Oh, I think there was a slight tap on the left rear corner of the McLaren there. And in terms of your question, Kylo, in actual fact, if possible, you may be able to do a bit of searching for, because I'm not actually 100% certain, because that penalty may have come through prior to his pit stop and served it there. I'm not sure if he still has 5 seconds carrying on over for Luke Whitehead, because he did seem to drop a fair few positions, which could have been purely undercut related, or may have been as a result of that penalty. So I'm not 100% certain as it stands right now, but Grant Korekis now has got all sorts of pressure from his teammate of Luke Whitehead, and now in towards Copse Corner. Surely doesn't look to try it here. And yeah, so that penalty has been cleared. So Luke Whitehead, this is for genuine position, this is genuine pace, and a genuine surge through the field to maybe challenge for another race victory this season. And after what was not really a very comfortable start for this man, he is now looking to see, can he take his 4th victory of the season? Because right now, if anyone can do it, he really does feel like the man on a mission to close this one out, and it'd be his home race as well if he can put it all together. But he's got Korekis in front of him. How kind is Korekis going to be? These two closing all the time towards Tinko van der Velde. It was another half a second gained for Korekis there, but it was a full 3/4 of a second from Luke Whitehead. If you're Korekis right now, if you scrap with your teammate, maybe you end up P3, because Whitehead is looking like he is faster. I need to check on Carpenter, because he is battling around the outside of Anthony barrier. Stoke Corner just about keeping it within the bounds of the circuit, give or take. And it looks like down the inside in towards Club Chicane, and he is going to get the move done. I think a little bit of contact to himself and Mantine, but nothing too severe. And the big man Boatley eventually manages to use that straight line speed capability and get himself ahead of the Ferrari. And that is P9 for Teemu Karppinen, still having to manage those tyres. So again, pulling over to the right-hand side of the circuit. When you go off the racing line, you are cooling your tyres in these wet conditions. Of course, not something you often do, because you can pick up marbles when it is in the dry, but it is quite a useful thing to be doing a lot of in these conditions. Steve Hansen chopping and changing his lines. Michael Frey joining this scrap as well. And now Luke Whitehead. Oh, we got very close between those two. And support for Mr. Carpet once again. We'll have to see how this plays out. But yeah, it's been a monstrous drive so far from Luke Whitehead. Bear in mind, he started in a P5. Wasn't really anywhere to be seen in the fight in the opening stages of this race. And then just at the tail end of the first stint, started to chip away at the cars ahead. Obviously had that contact with Statsenko, misjudgment, lost him 5 seconds. Had to do it all again in the second stint. And now finds himself less than 1.5 seconds away from race leader Tinko van der Velde. But right now, Grant Karekas is bringing his teammate with him. And it's a tricky one to play out because Karekas is going to be able to get to the back of Tinko van der Velde. The rate of pace that he's gaining at, it was another 0.5 second. It was awkward overtake for the traffic there for Tinko van der Velde, and it could actually play out quite nicely for Karekas and Whitehead. So again, that's another little bit of time lost between our leading pair. So Karekas is going to close on the back of Tinko, and he very much is going to be wanting to see if he can bring another victory to his name. But Whitehead, your championship leader, has now finally got himself ahead of George Boothby, who is very much a direct competitor at this stage of the season. He wants a piece of that top prize. And it's going to be such a close finish. 3/4 of a second between Tinko van der Velde and Grantas Karekas and Luke Whitehead. Definitely the fastest of the three, but how aggressive is he going to be? Does he want to get Karekas out of the way and then take on Tinko himself? Or is he going to let it play out? Use a bit of Karekas' tricks against him and try to be patient and see if that plays out in the end. But there we go. That margin disappearing all the time for the Dutchman. Tinko van der Velde, he's had many a race victory. Hasn't been with us in terms of consistent races all too long, but he made a mighty statement last season in the Audi. It's been a decent season so far in the BMW, but he has struggled, and it's been a while since he took a round victory. It was at the start of the season that he last had a race win. We are now in race number 9. As Luke Whitehead being, yes, a little bit deceiving over his review of his own tyre situation. And whilst those tyres may feel like they are dying, he seems to be managing them pretty well. As again, as the lap times come on in, 0.5 second gain for both Karekas and Whitehead over this BMW. You can see through Copse Corner and just kind of the track a lot drier than it once was. The BMW, it's stable in these conditions, but the problem is it does burn through its front tyres, and I think that's what's really starting to give way now. I need to briefly check in on Michael Frey versus Valentin Barrier. Then we'll head back to our top 3 in just a moment. Frey trying to go around the outside in towards Magnussen. Beckett surely can't make that one stick. He doesn't, but as we now head towards our top 3, it is Van der Velde, Karekas, Whitehead, all battling for P1 with just 13 minutes of the race left to go. Who is going to take victory? Karekas, I don't think he has had a victory so far this season. He hasn't. His last victory, I think, was the last race of season 11. But now, making their way through as Carpenter makes a move on Statsenko. So the Bentley, he's finding pace at this stage of the race as well. So potential choices that were made prior to this stint starting as your tyre pressures starting to really pay off now. Also the setup choice as well, and the rain has stopped and there won't be any more rain to the end of this one. So it is dry running on these dying wet tyres. It's all going to be about trying to keep them alive, and right now the BMW is not doing that. Karekas, is this his chance? He's sent one down the inside of the loop, and Luke Whitehead might be trying to take the pair of them if they're at it, because the acceleration in that flat 6 power Porsche is mighty. It's got a good run, side by side, respectful racing between the two of them. They're going to be 3 wide, aren't they? Luke Whitehead pushing his teammate along in towards Brook as they go. Karekas down the inside, heading towards his next turn. Tinko van der Velde, can he fight it around the outside? He's trying to, but Karekas surges into the lead, and now it's Luke Whitehead versus the BMW. Who's going to fare better and all that? Karekas trying to use the opportunity, and maybe his only opportunity to break away. Luke Whitehead trying to go around the outside of Tinko van der Velde now. The BMW struggling, falling away, and he's closing stages of the race. Luke Whitehead trying to keep it towards the inside, but the BMW will not move. It will not falter, and he stays in P2. And a lift off from Karekas. He's gone deep. So is the BMW, and Luke Whitehead with the tyre advantage, with the performance advantage. I think the Porsche is through into Magnussen. Beckett say go. Tinko trying to fight it, but he can't go back towards Luke Whitehead, and Tinko has to go down into P3 after leading the race for so long. And now it's Veloce Esports 1 and 2. Karekas leads ahead of Luke Whitehead. Now these two, they seem to be best placed at the moment of this stage of the race. But Luke Whitehead, he's shown fantastic pace. As long as Tinko is not able to challenge for a move here, I would imagine the Luke Whitehead, although he's got deep into a Stowe corner, that could be a costly error because he needs to catch 1.2 seconds now over Korekis, and that gap may continue to grow because Tinko van der Velde, he's still hustling the back of that Porsche, but I think surely in the end is not going to be able to fight the performance difference right now, and now it's all down to the British driver. He's got fastest lap of the race by almost a full half a second, but he's got a lot of time to close up the two Genesis Esports Ferraris scrapping away, and it's Cody Sherritt who right now holds the advantage over Luke Anderson in the closing stages of this race. Niels Nargs versus Janus Reinders. Nargs around the outside of the McLaren. It's all kicking off in the final stages. Incredible move from the Aston Martin driver. Once again, he's had a few moves around the outside today. And McCoskey, who of course had that penalty as earlier on in the race, dropped 15 seconds of track time in the pit stops. And he's now still fighting his way for P18. Narks had a drive-through penalty. Janus Reinders was in the wall at one point, but they're still fighting on, and there is still so much to play for. The gap now, 1 second, 1.2 seconds. Korekis charging on. Has there been any more pace lost in the Porsche? In the McLaren, we'll have to wait and see. Iamalo versus Bischoff. Bischoff as well has been mighty in the closing stages of this race. He's battling with his fellow Lamborghini driver. Bouncing barrier versus Michael Frey. Frey, big oversteer in Wolfbrunger's corner. How did he hold on to that? The answer is barely, but he did manage to keep pointing in the right direction, but he's looking to try and get himself in the top 10. That might be a personal best result for the Swiss driver if he can make it done. He's been going from strength to strength in that Porsche, and the custom BOP really starting to bring him into effect. As on that last lap, Grant Korekis unstandably gained half a second over his teammate Luke Whitehead. But with 9 minutes left on the clock, we've got about 5 laps left to go, and it's going to go down to the wire, I have no doubt. Will it go the way of Korekis, a champion from 2 seasons ago, or will it be Luke Whitehead who adds a 4th victory to his tally here in season 12 and really looks to make a statement in towards the final third of the season as to who's gunning for that P1 prize? Cody Sherritt versus Antonio Fedeli, and Cody Sherritt takes a position away from the Italian driver, makes his way up into P13. Antonio Fedeli's been struggling a little bit of pace over the last couple of laps. McCoskey versus Reinders. I think Reinders, especially with that off, scrub those tyres that bit more, and I think McCoskey surely at this stage is going to have the more competitive package. The question is, does he have enough straight line speed in order to get the job done heading in towards Stowe corner? They go, is he brave under brakes? He's brave, but he's not brave enough in order to get the move done just yet. Into the club chicane they'll be heading, but that McLaren holds on to the position for the time being. How are we faring at the front of the field? Luke Whitehead still a second away from Korekis. Korekis, the young Lithuanian, a man that held the #1 plate on the LFM platform for a long time. He's since been demoted to P4 in the LFM platform, with courtesy of his 2 teammates Luke Whitehead and George Boothby displacing him and getting those alien licenses. Big congratulations, of course, to all of those who have acquired. That is a mighty effort. Meanwhile, McCoskey trying to go all the way around the outside. Isn't going to be given anything to work with. King of oversteer to put on the exit. Can he get better traction? He's got a pretty good run, but I don't know if it's good enough. Last lap around, it was only a 1/10 of a second gained for Luke Whitehead, and that error, that little scrap with Tinko van der Velde, that might prove costly at this stage of the race. Niels Narks continuing his charge through the field. He is lapping faster than anyone else. He's the only man still in the 2:03s in this Aston Martin. He is 2 seconds faster than the cars that sit ahead of him at this point of the race. He's still got the windscreen wiper on. You don't need that one, Niels, but one way or another, he is charging his way through the order. He's had that drive-through penalty, but he has not given up, and the experience inside the cockpit of that car is certainly giving him opportunities to still score some valuable points in this championship. Will he even make a move down towards Magnus and Beck as he sends one down the inside? Surely Fedeli can't fight this one. The grip advantage is just too severe, and Niels Narks goes flying on through. I do actually need to check. There's no way this man is on the slick tyres. I don't think he is. He is just on the wet, but that Aston Martin just nursing those tyres very nicely. For those who are wondering why am I going to that camera, the slicks have a yellow sidewall for the Pirelli logo, whereas the wets have a black sidewall, and that was definitely some black sidewall tyres on that Aston Martin. So it's still equal compounds between each of these cars, but Niels right now just very, very comfortable in that Aston Martin and is gaining a lot of time over the cars that sit ahead of him. Top 10, I don't think is on the cards. There's a big gap between P11 and P12, but I think certainly top 12, which for getting a drive-through penalty in a 90-minute race would still be a fantastic result. Gap between Whitehead and Korekkas not closing at this stage of the race. The two Lamborghinis of Marco Bischoff and Iamolo still kicking off all the way to the end, and yet we could even have some tyre explosion. It could be like the Formula 1 race. I think it was all the way back in 2012 or 13 if memory serves. We had all of our failures around the circuit. I think it's 13, and it was certainly a dramatic end to that race and kind of an unpredictable one. It could even be that as well. As a somewhat of an expert, for reasons I won't dive too much into, I've exploded a few tyres in ACC myself in conditions not dissimilar to this. It's a bit tricky to do, but you know, if you work hard enough and you practice hard enough, you can do it. It won't help you. I wouldn't encourage you to do it, but it is something that can be achieved. And Silverstone race circuit, of course, very high loads on these tyres, so these tyres are going to be screaming. They're old wet tyres on a dry circuit, and they are falling apart for some of these cars. The 296 of Makoski, he gets himself up another position now into P17, as Luke Whitehead, actual fact, only gained 8 thousandths last time around. Korekkas, did he manage to keep his teammate behind for just long enough to keep him out of contention for the race win? Will Korekkas bring this one home, or can Whitehead do something special in the last couple of laps? Bischoff versus Iamolo, two identical cars, very similar situations and pace at this stage of the race, but Bischoff has a great run out of Stowe Corner and is defensive again from Iamolo. Bischoff unable to do anything there, trying to go all the way around the outside. He's trying to force the issue. He can't make it stick. Meanwhile, someone that has done is Valentin Barry. He's got past Statsenko, who's sent towards the outside, in towards the club chicane, and Michael Frey still trying to go for P10 in this Porsche, trying to see what he can do. We know this McLaren has been struggling, but that Porsche is tricky. You can see fighting the car next to this Tokyo Drift here in Silverstone, as we now make our way in towards Abbey, followed by Farm Curve. And the Porsche get the run. He's fighting the car at every given instance. These cars just have no grip anymore whatsoever. Niels Knox, how is he travelling? Still 203.752 from him. It's the fastest lap he's delivered all race. In actual fact, it's the fastest lap of the race so far. But I think he must have been validated somewhere, hence why it's not appeared for him. But he's loving these conditions. He would have wanted this to be a 2-hour race, I am sure. But Michael Frey not giving up. Drivers still trying to dry out their tyres, it's trying to cool down their tyres as much as they can, as Statsenko, a little bit deep on the brakes, but does pull out to the apex in the end when he needs to. But Michael Frey all over the gearbox, senses an opportunity on the exit. Left field barely ahead with between them, and we know that Statsenko has had a little bit of contact already this race. Surely we'll have to defend the inside line, because I imagine otherwise Michael Frey's going to have it. He's trying to decide which way he's going to go towards the outside line, but the McLaren in the end does just about enough on the defence. Frey, can he get a move on the exit? He's trying to get his way into towards the top 10 to be a fantastic result for the number 23 car if he can. And now trying to go around the outside into Magnussen Beckett. That's brave. Statsenko gives him respectful racing room, and Michael Frey around the outside in towards Beckett he goes, and he does get the Porsche into P10. White flag for George Boothby. I think just a little bit of a moment in towards Stowe Corner, nothing too special there. Bischoff still unable to make his way past Emelo, and now as they climb up towards Stowe Corner, the McLaren straight line speed trying to fight back towards Michael Frey, but will the speed advantage in the corners be enough for the Porsche to hold on? Statsenko trying to hustle the McLaren as best as he can through that sequence, can't make it stick, and I think Michael Frey is safe for now. Meanwhile, Cody Sherratt versus, that is Nuremberger in the Porsche. The Porsche is loving these conditions in the closing stages, trying to go up the inside of the South African. In actual fact, I'm not sure who's actually trying to overtake who here, but I tell you what, Niels Knox is trying to take the pair of them. He's been storming his way up through the order. I said he could be on for P12, and here he is, absolutely in the thick of the action. Sent one on the inside of Nuremberger. Will there be any late stage penalties? We'll have to wait and see. We had a warning for car number 19, but nothing else, and Niels Knox may be about to snatch another position away from Cody Sherratt, as Statsenko unable to reclaim that P10 spot from Michael Frey, and Granta Korekkas will be making his way onto the final lap of the race very, very shortly. Lewis Roters unfortunately not participating in this one this evening. Would have been so good to see how the other ITB racing car would have got on, but Grant Carreras starts the final lap of the race. A second separates him and his teammate Luke Whitehead as they've surged their way back through the order to get themselves towards the pointy end of the grid as the conditions have changed. I said it could all come down to the wire. Iamolo and Bischoff still tussling away for P5. But I don't think right now Bischoff is close enough to make anything happen. He'll surely have to have a mega run through Magnus and Beckett if he really wants to make something stick. Nils Knox, you'd have to assume, would be able to get moved on. He's been a second clear of all of these cars that sit in front of him, and the Aston Martin is no slouch in a straight line either. As Luke Whitehead too far away to do anything about Grant Carreras. Will that be his biggest opportunity? Will he be ruining the mistake that he made through his very corner just a few laps ago when they were battling with Tinko van der Velde? Bischoff unable to close the gap to Iamolo to get himself along the inside, and Iamolo managing to keep the fellow Lamborghini behind just enough, filling the rear view mirrors, but unable to do anything on this occasion. What about this as we go on board with Nils Knox? Not the best of runs through Magnus and Beckett's by the looks of it. He's got a bit of work to do in the second half of his lap if he wants to get that P12 spot. It's been a fantastic resurgence through the field for the German driver, but it doesn't look like right now he's got enough, but he's definitely got pace. He's got a performance advantage, and he's trying everything he can to see if he can use it. But meanwhile, Luke Whitehead, he was looking so mighty in the middle stage of this race, but it's just fallen away from him at the last moment, and someone else has fallen away for two Lamborghinis come together. But I think Marco Bischoff is in fact going to lift out the throttle. The battle will continue all the way to the end, but respectful stuff between those two. But as Grant Carreras comes through Low Fuel corner, it's been 90 minutes of mayhem. Patience is always a virtue in racing, and the Lithuanian surges way to the top step of the podium one more time for Grant Carreras. It's victory here at Silverstone. Luke Whitehead takes P2. Tinko van der Velde, after leading the race for so long, take P3. George Boothby P4. Bischoff unable to make the move on Dario Iamolo in the end for P5. What about Knox versus Cody Sheridan? It's still kicking off all the way to the end. Around the outside, the Aston Martin tries to go, cutting back towards the inside. It's great defense from Cody Sheridan. Support from Genesis Esports in the chat for their team, but will it be a drag race to the line? The Aston Martin, he gets a bit of a kick of oversteer, and Nils Knox's charge will end at P13, valiantly defended from Cody in the end. Makoski as well fighting the other Genesis Esports Ferrari will only be good enough for P17 in the end. Luke Anderson takes the short run to the line and will just about hold on to that position. Another warning for Marco Bischoff in the closing stages there, but I imagine because he didn't claim that position after the contact, that was why the stewards have allowed him to get away with that. And in the end, as our final cars make their way towards the line, we haven't got any more battles kicking off in these closing stages, but I think that's just about enough as far as I'm concerned, because my goodness, what a fantastic tussle between all of our grid in the closing stages of that one, between the weather, the strategy, all of those different things that we had factoring in these closing stages. We've got some formation running between certain cars. I think it might be Oystein Brennan that is the last car to make his way to the line, and it is. And that was 90 minutes of action here at Silverstone Race Circuit for round number 9 of the Pro Series. And it's Grant Carreras who takes victory. And you just could not call it. Luke Whitehead, he looked so fast at certain stages of that race. But in the end, when he needed to get it done, it just fell away from it. He needed to go through with Carreras. His whole plan of kind of sitting back with Carreras was working fine, but he needed to go with him and not have that follow-up scrap. And that one mistake at Stowe Corner, where he went that little bit wide, and that opened up the opportunity for Tinko to kind of battle that little bit further in all of that, just put him under enough pressure so he ended up having to think about what was going on in his rearview mirrors as opposed to what was going on ahead of him. And I think that was the crunch point in him having a chance to reclaim to claim another race victory. So that tally will still only stay at 3 wins for Luke Whitehead. But as some extra stats coming in from the ever-helpful Kylo, that Grantus, that is his 7th victory in the Case King Pro Series and his 20th podium. Luke Whitehead, takes his 12th podium. Oh, excuse me, the 20th podium for Luke Whitehead, a 12th podium for Tinko van der Velde, and also some other stats amongst all of that as well. And we do in fact have Grandes Carrecas, who has joined the interview waiting room, so we will look to bring him on in just a moment and speak to the man that has taken another race victory in the Pro Series and added one to his ever-growing tally. Grandes Carrecas, a mighty, mighty show from you today, and surging away through the order of what was a chaotic, a wonderful, beautiful race at Silverstone. Big congratulations to you. How are you feeling?
Thank you very much. It was a really eventful race. Yeah, I'm feeling, I don't know, I'm shocked what just happened. You know, our pace was really good at the first stint with Luke. We were just a little bit stuck behind the guys in front a little bit, so leaders could pull away. But yeah, we just pitted a lot later in the first stint, and like our tires were just like so much quicker, like almost a second a lot quicker somehow. Like we didn't expect that to happen. We just, you know, drove a race, and yeah, it was just unbelievable performance by both of us. And I'm just shocked how I performed today as well.
Yeah, it was an absolutely fantastically executed race from you. That performance advantage that you had, you know, Luke was looking like he was just slightly quicker than you behind, but when it came to that crunch point, when you were approaching Tinko, the difference maker being that whilst you dispatched Tinko pretty quickly and you were able to get away, Luke, he followed through relatively quickly, but they had a little bit of an additional exchange, shall we say, through Stowe Corner and kind of in the subsequent corners afterwards, and you capitalised on that gap beautifully, just being able to extend away and really try to push on. How convinced were you that you were going to be able to keep that gap to the end, or were you thinking that Luke, with that extra bit of pace that he seemed to have in the second phase of the race, that you'd be able to close that one down?
Yeah, I was a bit worried about Luke's pace because he was like even quicker than me by like few tenths as well. Like, I mean, you all know that Porsche is really strong, and Luke is absolute beast in this car as well and overall. So yeah, I was a bit worried when catching George and Tinko, but when I got them past, like, I don't know, we're just kind of the same pace at the end. Maybe just Porsche's tires died off or something like that at the end, because it stopped raining, so the track pretty much dried out. So yeah, maybe it's just because of tires or because the track dried out. Maybe that helped me at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Porsche's always had a little bit of a tendency to be a bit harsher on its tires. I think going on board with Luke on a couple of occasions, he was definitely wrestling that Porsche around. There was no doubt about it. You were making him work hard behind the wheel in that car, but in the end, I think he just didn't have anything left. But it was beautifully executed from you, and of course your first victory of the season, and kind of keeps you, potentially in that sort of championship contention. You came into this round P5 in the standing. Of course, we do have those drop scores and everything that looks a factor in as well, and I think round number 4 wasn't one of your strongest, but the rest of the season so far has been pretty consistently, delivering points throughout, and we've still got 3 races left to go, and that victory may have come at a good time to really kind of keep that championship fight on your side alive. Speaking of which, with the next circuit coming up being the wonderful Suzuka, any instincts on how we think that you might be faring on that front, how the McLaren might deliver pace there?
I think Suzuka has usually been a pretty good track for me. I mean, not the weakest, not the best maybe, but yeah, I think one of the stronger tracks for me, because I've been driving quite a few races before in the Maka in Suzuka, so I have a bit of practice as well. So I think I'm pretty confident about my pace, but it's just about delivering the quality and the pace in the race. Like, that's what I've been struggling most about the season. So hopefully we'll have pace, and yeah, hopefully we'll deliver it next week.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think this is definitely a fantastic bit of momentum to build upon on that front. It's been 2 Veloce McLaren victories in a row now on your side, but of course you taking that brilliant victory today, executing a very patient race as well. We were commenting in the comms box, over the fact that there was some of the other competitors on circuit that you were racing against who really were kind of trying to go every time a gap opened up. It was immediately trying to send one up the inside, but from your side, you just looked like you kind of approached things with a bit more time, a bit more patience, knowing that you had that 90-minute race and how the conditions could really play into effect. And in the end, that was a big difference maker and a really crucial piece in you bringing home that victory. So massive congratulations to you on that masterclass today, and look forward to seeing you next week at Suzuka.
Yep, thank you very much, man. Yep, see you soon.
Thanks a lot, Grantis. Great stuff to speak to our race winner from today then of Caracas, and it was definitely one. It could have gone either way. You know, at one point George Boothby looked like he was doing enough to hold off Tinko van der Velde. Then Tinko got ahead. He looked like it was under control. He had that margin over George when he had that kind of some form of technical issue with his headset during the middle of the race. And then, as Grant says, you know, the pace advantage that Luke and Grant had in those closing stages, all of those drivers that went for that overcut strategy just surged their way through the field. And in the end, that was the biggest, most crucial decision that really affected how this race played out. So incredible stuff. In actual fact, we've got Luke in the interview room as well. We have a double Veloce interview. How exciting. We will bring Luke on in to have a chat with us. Luke, a bit of a frustrating end, I imagine, to that one. You must be rather gutted. It looked like at one stage that maybe a fourth victory of a season was on the cards for you, but just in the end, just getting away from you with Grant, your teammate, taking that one. How are you feeling after that one?
Yeah, well, first off, good evening, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Yeah, I'm honestly pleasantly surprised. Coming into this race, I was basically looking at a damage limitation race, and obviously after quali, that was especially my kind of mindset. And then as soon as I saw that it was going to rain, I was like, well, game on, because I know that I'm quick in the wet, I know the car's quick in the wet, and it was basically a case of if I could get clear of the track, you know, we could be fighting for the win. And yeah, I mean, they didn't make it easy. You know, we were stuck behind Jards for quite a while, who I was hoping would make it easy for me, but he didn't. So I had to make my move through, and obviously got a penalty for that, which I don't fully understand, if I'm totally honest. But I'll obviously review it in the replay. And yeah, and then obviously we had to contend with Osterman's teammate, who was, you know, obviously trying to back me up for Jakob. And yeah, got past him as well. You know, it was again quite robust, but we had to do it because otherwise I'd have just fell back into the cars behind. And yeah, and by then we had a bit of clear track. We were able to push myself and Grantus, you know, kind of working together, getting through that train. And then once we pitted, you know, obviously I had to serve that 5 seconds and came out in dirty air, but got through it quite quickly. And then obviously it was Grantus hunting down the two leaders and then myself behind. And, you know, I knew that when I got there, because I knew it was a case of when at that point, you know, me and Grantus were covering insane pace, and I knew once we got there we needed to make quick work, so we wouldn't have much time on our hands. And obviously, you know, Grantus got past George. George let us both go, which was really nice of him, and I thank George for that. Very much appreciate it. And yeah, and then obviously it was all about getting past Tinko, and you know, once Grantus kind of wedged his foot in the door, it was a really good move from him. It was just about me getting him past, and then me getting past myself. You know, bump drafted Grantus through, and then yeah. I knew that I'd have the traction to outdo Tinko then, and yeah, then I just cruised home behind Grantus, and we came home with another team 1-2, which is awesome. Another one for the season.
Yeah, fantastic result for your team once again. And yeah, just kind of going over that, you know, those final stages, of course, you know, absolutely. We were looking at timing sheets, and, you know, there were times where you were, you know, over a second faster than George and Tinko ahead. So, you know, we were very much aware that in the closing stages, it was all going to kind of concertina and bring everyone together to really kind of see that all play out. And it was a fantastic fight amongst all of that. And I'd be interested from your perspective. There was one moment in kind of that exchange, and I felt like it maybe kind of defined how that end, you know, positions kind of played out, because you were generally the fastest car in that second stint, and you were chipping away extra tenths up towards Grantus, and then kind of worked with him, like I say, in those final few laps. And then during the fight with Tinko, there was a moment where you ended up going a little bit wide, which didn't lose you too much time in itself, but it gave Tinko kind of enough of a sniff to kind of continue to apply some pressure, and the gap then to Grantus just opened up a little bit in that sequence, and it never quite then came down from there. Do you think that was kind of, if that hadn't have happened, that would have maybe been enough to keep you in the tow for a battle with Grantus, or do you think really, with how the tyre situation was playing out and the pace between you two, that was a way it was always kind of likely to settle in the end?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I knew how quick that BMW is down the straight, and I knew the Porsche was particularly slow in Sector 1 and down that back straight. So I knew that Tinko would have a pop, because he does like a late diving move, and I knew that was going to be on the cards. So, you know, I broke a little bit late in hindsight, maybe didn't need to, but it was obviously just to cover myself, because I knew, you know, I could maybe fight Grantus, but I wasn't in that mindset. I was just like, finish second, you know, get a buffer behind, and then we're fine, you know. And as I said, I was in voice chat with Grantus, and I was just at that point there, I knew I was ahead of all the people I needed to be ahead of. You know, George, Jacob, you know, the championship rivals, I was ahead and gaining points no matter what happened. So I was just happy to sit behind Grantus at that point. And as I say, he thoroughly thoroughly deserved the win. And as I said, happy to get another 1-2. It's an awesome result.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. And yeah, and like I say, another crucial podium to add to your tally. Only 3 races left to go. And of course, you know, when we look at kind of drop scores for the season, your results have been mightily consistent in terms of banking in those very valuable points. So you are going into the closing stages in kind of almost a point of optimizing your points total rather than kind of trying to claw back points in closing stages, which kind of, I imagine, gives you kind of some level of comfort maybe into these final rounds, but I've no doubt you'll be pushing on regardless. We're heading to Suzuka for next week for round number 10. And speaking to Korekas, he felt like that was a good track for him, and he felt like he should be able to deliver a strong result there. How are you feeling for how the Porsche may fare in that one?
With regarding to the car, I have no idea. You never really know until you're on the grid. But I mean, as tracks go, I'm a big fan of Suzuka, much more than Silverstone. Silverstone's one of my weaker, or one of my lesser favourite tracks, I should say. But yeah, Suzuka is one that I've always went well at, so fingers crossed that can continue. But as I say, I know Grantus is very strong there. And as I say, I know that Osterman and George, they're all going to be biting at my heels. So, you know, it's not a certainty, but just need to keep the consistency, keep the mindset going, because clearly that's been working pretty well this season so far. So just got to keep a level head, and hopefully everything else should sort itself out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to any sort of, you know, new sim racers kind of making their way, or, you know, anyone dabbling in the world of LFM for the first time, I think, you know, that advice is incredibly sound. That, you know, especially when you're thinking about a season result, you know, maybe those extra positions from time to time aren't always, you know, worth completely shooting for, because consistency in the end is a thing that will really end up paying dividends on your net championship results. So yeah, absolutely. So big congratulations to you, Luke, on a fantastic drive back through the field and a great 1-2 finish for Veloce in all of that one. Great to talk to you as always, and look forward to seeing how you get on at Suzuka next week.
Yeah, thank you very much, mate. Great to speak to you again. I've missed you the last few weeks.
I've missed being here the last couple of weeks. It's great to be back in the Cosbox. So always a pleasure.
Well,
Luke.
Welcome back, mate. So take care of yourself, and hopefully speak to you next week. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, buddy. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Great to catch up with our P2 man from today. Luke Whitehead, a fantastic result from the Veloce driver, and continuing championship leader George Boothby. It looks like with those drop scores playing into effect that where he was sitting and where Luke was sitting in that one, maybe that was really going to kind of close up that gap and see George Boothby be at the top of those championship standings. But with Luke Whitehead taking P2 and George Boothby taking P4, that gap is only going to continue to grow. So vital finishes required by George Boothby in the closing stage of the season, as for the likes of Jacob Osterman. Lewis Roters still in the fight as well, of course, just not driving today. Tinko van der Velde, there or thereabouts, could still be in there, and Grant Korekas with that victory, he could be a bit of a dark horse in the closing stages as well. So still very much all to play for. We'll go for a bit of a rundown of our results from today and see exactly how they ended up falling in the end. So for round number 9, Korekas ahead of Whitehead and Tinko van der Velde, with George Boothby and Iamolo rounding out the top 5. Bischoff returns his way to P6, and with Jardier, Carpenter and Barrier, Frey P10, fantastic drive from him, Statsenko, Sherritt, Narks, Nuremberger and Fideli. Those two Porsches, great stuff from them to be in the top 15, and Michael Frey going from strength to strength to get that top 10 finish. Anderson, Makovsky, Reinders, Santama, Ida, Duvela, Soltov, Duran, one of our new American drivers in the field, Mex, Brennan, Proel, Mahoney, Drexler, Osterman and Rainier going the way to the top 30, although those final 3, and alongside Samir Foch, unfortunately being our retirees from the race on this occasion. It was a dramatic and very, very a very exciting race, but adrenaline fueled all the way to the end, up and down the grid, and you just did not know how it was going to play out at any stage. And it already looks like that Luke Whitehead could even be crowned the Season 12 champion as early as next week, because with drop scores into effect, with the season he has had so far, he is looking very difficult to catch, and I imagine that there'll be a confidence in the air that he is carrying over the next coming weeks. But of course, as he said, he needs to keep his head, he needs to stay consistent and make sure that he delivers when it matters. And yes, his worst results of the season so far being 2 P7 finishes. Oh, what a disaster for Luke Whitehead. He's delivered a fantastic series of runs so far during the course of this season, and into Suzuka he'll be looking to hopefully do the same. But my goodness, what a fantastic round to bring the Pro Series back into action after some absence for the last couple of weeks. And as we made our way over that 1,000 follower milestone, as we come towards the tail end of the year and look to conclude this epic championship for the second time over the course of the last 12 months or so, that we are having continuing action, which I'm sure is going to be keeping us very delightfully busy all the way to the end. And whilst Luke Whitehead might be looking in a pretty handy-dandy state to be closing out the championship sooner rather than later, I have no doubt that his teammates and those other drivers will be keeping him on his toes and giving us some fantastic on-track drama to enjoy. Speaking of which, if you have enjoyed tonight's stream, then do consider giving a follow to the channel so you can stay in tune with all of the upcoming championship action that we will have coming up. And also, if you have enjoyed the Pro Series, this is your first time seeing it, or maybe if you've been a veteran viewer over the course of the last few months, or even last couple of years in the world of LFM, do consider voting for the championship in the VCO Simi Awards, and seeing if we can perhaps get a nice little badge and a prize for this wonderful division. These drivers, they put on a fantastic show for us each and every week. The hard work that all of you guys in the community did on the custom BOP, making Season 12 the best season of the Case King Pro Series that we have ever had, I think, arguably, and just continuing to go from strength to strength with exciting things, of course, always on the horizon. And of course, if you want to get involved in some of the action yourself in the future, then head over to the LFM website, lowfuelmotorsport.com. Get yourself signed up, get yourself a license. You can work your way through the ranks and compete in some of these glorious championships like this and get some wonderful prizes. Or you can also do the great daily racing and make your way through the ranking system on all of that. If ACC isn't quite the thing for you, then R-Factor 2, of course, is on the platform. And there's also some extra division stuff for the world of World Rally Championship as well. You can do some things there and compete, I think, on some leaderboards and stuff like that. And of course, the AC, the original Assetto Corsa, has made its way onto the platform in alpha stage. So if you want to be a part of helping LFM build up that system and platform, and potentially even leading to some other things in the future as well for some extra fun championships, of course, a lot of variety and variability available on that game, then also have a look at get involved in some of that as well. It'd be great to have all of your help and support, and just to have you a part of this wonderful community. And if maybe the kind of the driving side of things isn't quite something that you want to get involved in, never fear, we'll have you anyway. We're a lovely bunch, really. And you can also join over on the Discord server as well, where we share everything from the world of real-world motorsport, sim racing, and also pictures of dogs and just kind of everything, really. So it'd be wonderful to have you a part of our ever-growing community as well on all of that. But I think for this evening then, as Silverstone brings us to a close as we enter the final quarter of the Case King Pro Series, I have no doubt that the coming weeks are going to be just as exciting as the last 9, so hopefully we'll be seeing as many of you there as possible for all of that motorsport action. But for tonight then, everybody, it's goodbye.